podcasts, including episodes with former US President Joe Biden, Polish Foreign Minister Radek Sikorski, and tennis great Martina Navratilova. Until the next time, bye for now.
From the BBC, that was the interview.
Magandang umaga, good morning Manitoba. Faith Fundal here in Studio 15 at Portage and Spence. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. Magandang umaga as well to folks watching us on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. We have lots of folks here on the program helping us. Brad Lillies, our streaming producer, Sierra Sanders, our studio director, and of course, Marshall Hodgins on the controls today. Thanks very much for helping make the show today. And Heather Wells is also pretty busy today, joining us from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, people in Leaf Rapids, it's a bit of an anxious morning there. They have until 9 this morning to get out of town. The town's being evacuated as 2 wildfires burn nearby, one threatening power lines, the other fire threatening the only road in and out of Leaf Rapids. The province estimates 328 people will be on the move. Municipal leaders say buses are available to take them to Winnipeg if they don't have their own vehicles. So we'll keep you in step with that story as it develops through the morning. An advocate for infill housing and urban forests is the first candidate to register in Winnipeg's Elmwood East Kildonan by-election. Emma Durand Wood is a writer who was trained as a library technician. That seat at City Hall has been vacant since the death of Councillor Jason Schreier in April. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 6:30.
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Heather Wells joining us from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. If you're in Leaf Rapids, you are listening to us at 94.5 FM. And as you work on evacuating the community, let us know how you're managing after you've figured things out. 204-788-3205 is our listener line. 204-788-3205. We'll be with you as you continue those evacuations throughout the morning here on the program. And as you heard, we will also hear from other folks who are helping people here. We'll hear how the Brandon Humane Society is stepping up to help wildfire evacuees from Leaf Rapids. That's coming up in our first half hour of the program here in about 15 or so minutes' time. In our 7 o'clock half hour, a Winnipeg teen is one of 15 students to receive a full ride scholarship to the University of Toronto. We'll hear more from them coming up here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Stay tuned. World Report is standing by.
On cue, the comedian Atsuko Okatsuka has the ability to take the most difficult life experiences and make them funny. Her new stand-up special deals with adult friendships, dives into her complicated childhood. She'll be here to tell you about growing up undocumented in the U.S. and turning that experience into comedy.
You know, I'm a very observant person. I always observe.
Q with Tom Power this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. It is a promise Prime Minister Mark Carney has made repeatedly to look to allies other than the United States to rearm Canada's military. But industry sources say Ottawa is about to award a major defense contract to an American company. The CBC's Kate McKenna reports.
Canada can work towards a new international set of partnerships.
While announcing new defence spending last month, Prime Minister Mark Carney expressed 2 clear priorities: rearming the Canadian military and reducing Canada's reliance on the United States.
We can pursue deeper alliances with stable democracies.
But defence experts say Canada is set to award a contract for night vision binoculars worth more than $100 million to an American company because the technical requirements to bid on the contract are so narrow that only one company in the world qualifies. The request for proposals closes later today. The French manufacturer Photonis sells night vision devices to other NATO allies. In a statement, it says it tried to convince Canadian officials that its criteria don't follow industry norms.
I don't have the details, but I will look into it.
Defence Minister David McGuinty couldn't explain why, but says Canada is standing by its goal to rely less on the United States.
Going forward, we're looking, of course, to work with other partners.
Dave Perry is a defence expert with the Canadian Global Affairs Institute. He says uncoupling Canada's military procurement from the United States could take time.
We have not gotten to a space where we're investing 75 cents of every dollar in the U.S. market by accident.
He says until recently, Canada's policy was to work closely with the United States, and he says they have been the world's leading arms market for generations. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
Benjamin Netanyahu is expected to face more pressure today to end the war in Gaza. The Israeli Prime Minister is on a visit to Washington. He's scheduled to meet with members of Congress on Capitol Hill. Last night, he was welcomed by U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House. Tom Perry reports.
Thank you very much, everybody. It's an honor to have Bibi and Sarah with us, friends of mine for a long time, and we had a tremendous success together.
U.S. President Donald Trump heaping praise on the Israeli Prime Minister and his wife at a White House dinner. Benjamin Netanyahu returning the favor.
I want to express the appreciation and admiration not only of all Israelis, but of the Jewish people.
Netanyahu presenting Trump with a letter nominating him for a Nobel Peace Prize. Along with the mutual flattery, this dinner and Netanyahu's visit are all about reaching at least a temporary peace in Gaza. Trump is trying to press Israel and Hamas to agree to a 60-day ceasefire and begin talks on a permanent end to the war. So far, there's been no breakthrough, while in Gaza, the fighting continues. The Israeli military says 5 of its soldiers were killed yesterday by a roadside bomb. The IDF says 888 troops have been killed since October 7th. Gaza's health ministry says the war has killed more than 57,000 Palestinians. Tom Perry, CBC News, Jerusalem.
A suspected Houthi attack has killed 2 crew members of a ship in the Red Sea. The bulk carrier is Greek-operated. It was attacked by drone and speedboats off the coast of Yemen. These are the first deaths in attacks on vessels in the Red Sea since June of last year. Houthis began attacking ships along the critical trade route in November of 2023. The rebel group says it is in solidarity with Palestinians caught in the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza. U.S. President Donald Trump is sending more weapons to Ukraine. This decision comes days after pausing some critical munitions shipments to the war-torn country.
We're going to send some more weapons. We have to. They have to be able to defend themselves. They're getting hit very hard now. They're getting hit very hard. We're going to have to send more weapons. Yeah, defensive weapons primarily, but they're getting hit very, very hard. It's very sad. So many people are dying in that mess.
Last week, the Trump administration halted the shipment of some weapons to Ukraine, including air defense missiles. The White House said it was part of a review of U.S. military spending, but some reports suggest there are concerns over the state of the U.S. military's weapons stockpiles. The number of confirmed deaths from the floods in Texas has now surpassed 100. The number of missing is not clear. Search efforts are nonstop, but there's little hope of finding more survivors. The CBC's Katie Nicholson has more from Kerrville, Texas.
You have to be standing next to it to really get a perspective of how tall this is. It's maybe 40 feet high.
Tom Carlson hits play on a video of an 18-wheel trailer swept up by the Guadalupe River, now deeply embedded in the muddy banks nearby of what remains of a Kerrville park.
I couldn't believe it. You just don't realize the power of rushing water.
Carlson's elderly parents had their own close call when the waters rose.
We got a call from them at 4:45 in the morning, and they were in their pickup moving up behind the house because the water was coming up so fast, and they're 88 years old.
There was no official flood warning at that hour, but they were lucky.
A neighbor knocked on their door, and I guess a tree had floated down on the neighbor's property and hit their front door, and everything gushed in.
Throughout the region, sometimes called Flash Flood Alley, backhoes and boats comb through the waters and mud for the missing, while those who have survived grapple with grief and the need for disaster assistance, like Auburn Gallagher in Sandy Creek, utterly isolated by floodwaters.
I know we're not San Angelo or San Antonio, but hell, we're human beings. Help us. Give us what we need. We don't want to be the stepchildren anymore.
Help is on the way. California, Florida, and Mexico have sent professional search, rescue, and recovery teams. But the true toll of this disaster still weeks away from being fully understood. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Kerrville, Texas.
A helicopter rescues people stranded by the rushing waters of the Batokoshi River in Nepal. At least 18 people were swept away when torrential rains caused the river to breach its banks. Houses and vehicles were swept up in the floodwaters. The Friendship Bridge, connecting Nepal and China, was also washed away. It is the major trade connection between the two countries. All direct trade through the route has been halted. The team behind a new all-Inuit law firm is on a mission to break down barriers in the justice system. Tulugak Law was set up in Iqaluit 7 months ago. As Samuel Watt tells us, it is now looking to expand its services.
I was like a really admittedly nerdy kid hanging out.
Curtis Mesha knew he wanted to be a lawyer ever since he could read. Now he heads his own law firm, Tulugak Law. It deals with the day-to-day basics, from estates, wills, to cases in the criminal court. Mesha describes his practice as Nunavut's only all-Inuit law firm.
I don't know, I think it's like the future of law in Nunavut in some ways.
Mesha has brought on 2 law students to help out. Caitlin Adams, who worked with the United Nations, says she's choosing law now to help uplift Inuit and be a warm, familiar face in a foreign system.
Sometimes the justice system scares me too. And it does feel like it can be a cold place.
Hope Carpenter doesn't see many Inuits in the legal profession. That leads to a lack of empathy and understanding of the realities in the North.
You know, how can that be justice for the people here to have outsiders come in and dictate what's right and wrong?
Part of the problem, she says, is the fact there's no permanent law school in any of Canada's 4 Inuit regions. But by taking on more Inuk lawyers, Curtis Mesha hopes to make the justice system more accessible and fairer.
I definitely see a lot of it as just making sure people understand everything that's going on.
And in the coming years, he hopes to have practices in every region of Inuit Nunanut, the Inuit homeland. Samuel Watt, CBC News, Iqaluit.
I was a ghost, I was alone.
That is Golden. It's from the Netflix animated movie K-pop Demon Hunters. The film tells the story of a K-pop girl group called Huntrix that also hunts demons. They're after demons disguised as a K-pop boy band called the Saja Boys.
Keeping you in check, keeping you obsessed. Play me on repeat, good I'll see in your head.
The bands are fictional, but the songs by Korean-American musicians are topping real music charts. This week, 7 Huntrix and Saja Boys songs were on the Spotify Top 50 global list. 6 of them were also on the Billboard 200. Billboard says K-pop Demon Hunters is the highest charting soundtrack to an animated film since Disney's Encanto spent 9 weeks at number 1 in 2022. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Magandang umaga, good morning, Manitoba. Faith Fundal here in Studio 15 at Portage and Spence. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Coming up in this hour of the program, we're going to check in with CBC producer Ellis Cho to explore why Canadians are willing to pay big bucks to smell good. You might not be surprised about that. That's still ahead. We're going to hear from Alex Ballingal as well, Deputy Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star, about what he is watching in Ottawa. First, though, as you've been hearing, hundreds are fleeing their homes in northern Manitoba because of wildfires. Some families will also need temporary homes for their furry relatives. We'll start the show by hearing about how the Brandon Humane Society is stepping up to help wildfire evacuees from Leaf Rapids. Coming up next here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Stay tuned. First, though, to our CBC Winnipeg local news desk, and Heather Wells joining us with a look at news headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, as you mentioned, people in Leaf Rapids have just a few hours left to get out of town. A mandatory evacuation is in place in that northern town because of wildfires burning nearby. About 328 people are getting ready to leave. They will be headed to Winnipeg. And once here, they'll be asked to report to the reception center at the Leela Soccer Complex. A First Nations elder says he was denied boarding by a WestJet ticket agent because of his photo identification. Lawrence Douglas Corbier was traveling from Montreal back to Winnipeg June 30th. He says when he showed his Indian status card as photo ID, the agent told him to step aside. He ended up missing his flight. We'll hear more about what happened there in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Heather Wells joining us from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Marshall Hodgins on the controls today. Hello to the folks watching us on CBC Television and the CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer today. We are expecting sunny conditions for Winnipeg with some fog patches turning into local smoke, or that fog will look like local smoke. You can see the sun rising here in downtown Winnipeg. Expecting a high of 26 degrees. Right now it is 11 in the downtown, 10 at the airport with partly cloudy conditions. We are still under a special air quality statement. Pretty much similar conditions for much of the listening region as well. We'll give you a full look at your forecast. As you can see, those current temperatures, Thompson 12 degrees in Brandon 8 degrees as well. And in Dauphin this hour, foggy at the airport and 8 degrees. In Churchill, mainly sunny and 15 degrees. Sierra Sanders is our studio director, and you're following the commute so far. Good morning.
Good morning. Very early morning, early start to the show. We are getting moving here, and that means the morning commute is getting moving as well. Nothing to report out there right now as it is just getting started. But if that's not the case, if there's something slowing you down, whether you are here in the city or out on the highways, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line, 204-788-3093.
Coming up to 14 minutes after 6 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, 94.5 FM in Leaf Rapids and in Brandon, 97.9 FM. As you've been hearing, wildfires continue to burn and threaten northern Manitoba communities. In Leaf Rapids, residents there have been given 24 hours to pack up and leave. That expires this morning. While many will find themselves in hotels or other temporary shelters, not all shelters welcome pets. So, enter Brandon Humane Society. It's set up an emergency pet shelter pop-up. Tracy Munn is executive director and shelter manager. During a conversation with CBC's Chloe Friesen, Tracy explained where the pop-up will be located.
It's up on the North Hill. It's Manitoba Transport Building, and they found it actually when Maurice Bouvier, who's with Manitoba Agriculture, called Friday and asked for our help and our support. I said, I hope you found a place. They did find a place. We met him along with about 7 or 8 of our volunteers yesterday and got it set up and ready. We set it up for about 60 animals, not knowing if there could be more or less. We just kind of have to go from there.
So you got a call from the government asking if you would help out?
Yes, I think Winnipeg's been inundated. The Winnipeg Humane Society is amazing. Luckily, they have a larger facility, a lot more staff, a lot more help. It's a little bit different at our facility. So we took a lot from the Cross Lake fire, so we were full with that and a lot of animals in foster. So when they first called, I was worried they were asking us if we could take more in the facility right now, which we couldn't. But when he explained what they were looking for, I said, of course, we're more than happy to help.
Okay, so you've created this entirely new space for the animals.
Yes.
How many animals are you prepared to take in?
Well, we were told that there could be anywhere to 117. However, often they say there can be a lot less than that. So we're hoping not that many because this is really stressful for these animals. A lot of these animals will never have been in a crate. So we've got big kennels set up. There's space. There's bedding in them. I've asked for music because I said these animals are going to be stressed enough. So if they can have calming music, that will help. But it's getting these animals out several times a day, more so for anti-anxiety reasons than it is for getting them out to the bathroom because, as I said, a lot of these animals won't be used to being in crates.
Right, and that'll likely take a lot of volunteers.
It will take a lot of volunteers. And so as I said to Morris, like his concern was morning. And I said, well, we need volunteers set up 8 to 12, 12 to 4, 4 to 8, breakfast coming. I mean, we're used to dealing with 80 animals at the shelter on a regular basis, but we have some staffing and we have a lot of volunteers to do that. These are animals out of their environment. Their rooms are not connected to an outdoor run where it's easy for them to get out. They have to be leash walked to go outside. We do have a small fenced area, and we're looking at getting a larger one for animals that aren't good on a leash and flight risks. We have to care for these people's animals just like they're our own animals. So there is going to be a lot of volunteers, and I do believe, depending on the amount of animals we get, I'm thinking, I said to Morris, probably 1 volunteer to 4 animals, because we want you to be able to spend time with those animals, to get those animals out. Animals that are stressed and scared, we've had feral animals come to our shelter from the north, and we sit and read to them. That brings them a lot. They like the calm and the quiet. We want to get them bones or busy toys or a nylabone or a benabone so they have something to do in those kennels also.
Right. It sounds like, I don't know if you've ever done anything like this before in terms of this scale, but it sounds like you've got a lot of ideas and practices to put in place that have to do with animal anxiety.
Well, I've been thinking about this for a long time, but I've also been doing this work for 28 years, and we deal with this, not to this scale, of course, and it's in our environment. I think the most we've brought in from up north at one time is probably about 25 animals, but you're there, you're on our site, we've got our great support system there. So this is a little bit different because we're taking in other people's animals. The ones we've taken in the past are usually stray animals that they really adapt. It's pretty amazing. We've taken animals from Leaf Rapids before. Actually, my sister has a dog from Leaf Rapids, and it's amazing that they can get on planes, they can fly down, and then they fly to Winnipeg Cargo. We have vans pick them up, they get back to the shelter, and it's really quite amazing how adaptable these animals are.
It sounds like it's something you obviously care a lot about. What is it?
My whole world.
What does it mean to you to be able to open up a space in a time like this?
Well, honestly, I'll be honest with you. When Morris called me, I was a little bit, oh, dear God, I don't know. I work 11-hour days. As I said, we've got 2 full-time staff at our shelter and 1 part-time and then some very, very part-time evening staff. We have an amazing team and the most amazing volunteers ever, people that are really, really dedicated. But we do this. We've been doing this. We take animals in from the north. We're used to scared and stressed animals. So for us, it's an honor. It's absolutely an honor. But I explained to Morris, I said, I will be there every day. I will be there on intake to help in every way we can. With our ideas, any knowledge we can give. I said, you'll have access to me 24 hours a day. But I also do run our shelter and work 11-hour days.
Right. That's going to be a lot. How are you going to take care of yourself in the midst of this, Tracy?
Well, I do. It's funny. You know what? People always, I said, if I haven't cracked yet, I'm unlikely to.
Okay. When do you expect to start taking animals in?
Well, that's 2 of our board members that actually live in Winnipeg drove out to help yesterday with our setup because they're very experienced with this. Said, like, they gave me the call today saying that Leaf Rapids is on 24-hour notice. So they could be coming by tomorrow, and I would imagine they'll fly right into Brandon.
Right.
So, and we want to set it up so these people, we are very conscientious about these animals getting tagged and information about the animals, who the owner is, what their likes are, what their dislikes. Do they have anxiety? Are they on a special diet? You know, are they a flight risk being walked? We want as much information on each kennel so that they can be properly cared for.
Tracy, what kind of donations are you in need of at the moment?
Well, I think probably we may ask for Morris, when he came yesterday, they had some donations of food and some better food. So we're going to probably do a post and stick to maybe at least 3 foods. We don't want to upset these tummies of these animals because, like I said, they're going through enough stress as it is, so we don't want to throw a bunch of different foods at them. So we'll probably do a post for the foods we're looking for. Okay. We took most of the bowls we could from the shelter, but we had given a whole trailer load of stuff into Winnipeg with the last evacuation, so some of it will come back to us, of course. Harnesses, really good harnesses, some extra leashes, some good collars, things, busy bones, benabones, nylabones, like in good condition, maybe rope bones, so these animals have something to do in their kennel.
Would you also be looking for more volunteers, or do you have kind of a dedicated
and you know what,
staff?
When we put a post, because we're going to see what we have, it kind of depends on how many animals we're getting, Chloe. We're hoping the lower end, but this could be the high end. And Morris said, you know, Winnipeg may have to help us a little bit more if it's on the high end, just because the facility we have here, we can only take so many. We can maybe find some fosters for a few of them. So let's just pray, hope and pray that it's on the lower end. But we'll run with whatever we get, and we'll make it work.
If folks want to find that information and see those posts, where can they find them?
Actually, we'll be doing a post on the on the Brandon Humane Society, right on our website.
Perfect.
We might share it on Facebook also, so people can see. And we'll want, probably for the most part, it'll be experienced owners, experienced volunteers, especially when you're handling animals.
Mm-hmm.
Brandon Humane Society Executive Director and Manager Tracy Munn speaking with the CBC's Chloe Friesen on Up to Speed yesterday afternoon.
As wildfires impact our province, keep up to date with CBC. For the latest information, listen to CBC Radio 1. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba or the CBC News app. For people who have a limited data plan or are running into spotty mobile service on the road, visit cbc.ca/lite. That's cbc.ca/LITE.
Coming up to 22 minutes after 6 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. 89.3 FM here in Winnipeg. And summer, of course, is here, which means it's time to pack our bags, catch a flight, and maybe head to our next adventure, if you can. The excitement of travel, though, often comes with the stress of long lines, overstuffed suitcases, crowded airports. How do you make this journey as smooth as possible? Joining us now for tips and tricks is Carl Moore, Associate Professor of Strategy and Management at McGill University in Montreal. Welcome to the program. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. Always fun to talk to my friends in Winnipeg.
It's good. I mean, this will be a fun thing because packing light during the summer months while ensuring you have everything you need can be a pretty, it can be a contentious thing for some folks. How do you deal with that?
Well, it's better than winter because, winter, Montreal and Winnipeg, we got to carry our big coats. We've got scarves, we've got hats and gloves and all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So in the summer, it's very, very possible. Now, what I recommend and what I've done is for years now, just have carry-on, backpack and a carry-on. Go get the right size, approved by Air Canada and WestJet. And we've done this for years now. It's easier in the summer because you have fewer clothes. You bring a pair of shorts, but on the plane you wear your pants. A female equivalent, you wear a long shirt and bring a jacket, which you may need when you're traveling in the evening time.
Right.
But you take that on the plane and just, if it's too warm, but I find planes fairly air conditioned. If it's too warm, just set the jacket up with your luggage and your hat, put it up there if you need to. But no one's going to hassle you for going through security with a jacket on and a hat. This is quite acceptable behavior. And the other thing I do is that I bring a few pairs of socks, often don't wear socks in the summer, and some underwear, and just wash them and let them dry while I'm out at the beach all day. So that you don't need to bring, 7 changes of clothing, bring a lot less and wash some. And it's also on holidays. It's not as if you're going to work and people go, oh, I saw that outfit yesterday. I can't believe it.
Right.
That kind of conversation is not going to happen on holidays.
What about common pitfalls? Because I know I have another friend who they love packing their own towel. And I'm like, come on, friend. You're going to have a towel where you're going. Why are you packing a towel? Are there other towel-bringing people you've encountered?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've run into people that must bring luggage. They put underneath, and they are waiting for the luggage at the turnstile. Well, I'm in the taxi headed to the beach. So that's the advantage of being only carry-on is that you go to the head of the line and you wave at people as you're going out to get the taxi or the subway into the town. It just works so much faster. And another great tip is to get Nexus if you can, which is allows you to go through the short line at the airport. So Montreal Airport, there's maybe 2 or 3 people ahead of me when I go through Nexus. Now, you've got to think about it and plan for it. It takes a couple of weeks to get, but it's like $10 or $15 a year. This is a great travel investment that I've had for years. And even in the U.S., I'm a trusted traveler, so I go through much shorter lines.
Right. I do have that like an internal grin whenever I see regular security lineups. What could look like, 20 minutes, and then I go into the Nexus line and I go,
yeah, it's brilliant.
Made it way. How do you stay calm and organized when you? There is something about being at an airport or being on a plane that somehow cancels out all of your brain power. And so when you get stressed out, suddenly it's this humongous thing. You can't find your seat. You can't, like all of these things. How do you deal with all of it? Because it's going to be busy.
Well, what I do is a couple things. One is I take a good book, a couple magazines along. So I'm enjoying reading while I'm in line. And you're going to have lines even if you have Nexus. So you just read, enjoy it, and you kind of go, man, the line ended. I got to stop reading.
How do you pay attention? You can read in lines?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the people in front of you move, and you kind of keep an eye on them, and the people behind you will cough if there's a long gap. And so
they'll tell you.
The other thing is I use on the plane is noise-canceling headphones, and I use them sometimes if I'm waiting in the lounge as well, is that it gets rid of the sounds of the engines to a large degree, and, crying children, which children will cry, and that's fine. It's normal. But by having I've had a pair of noise-canceling headphones for years, so it's now down to a couple of dollars a year in terms of the cost. But they last a long time. I was just charging them yesterday for a trip. Noise-canceling headphones, a great investment to make your life much more relaxed on the plane. And you can also use them to watch the movies on the plane or listen to good music, maybe catch up on your favorite podcast on your phone.
And then depending on what airplane you're on, if you have Bluetooth headphones as well, they'll let you connect. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. So there's a lot of entertainment available. I mean, you can download Netflix onto your phone. And I've seen people, I think they may be going blind eventually from, staring at little screens. I prefer an iPad because it's easier on the eyes. But it's something where on your phone, I've seen many, many people watching Netflix or other movies they've downloaded to their phone. And this means that you're guaranteed to have some of your favorite programs always at hand.
Carl, I mean, you live in the world of strategizing and managing. What is the one principle or one thing, because we talked about a bunch of different things here, but what's one thing that you think will help create a pathway for people to be able to do the things we talked about?
Focus on, I'm going to Hawaii. I'm escaping Winnipeg's chilly spring or whatever time it is, and I get to go to Hawaii or wherever you're going. So focus on this travel can be a bit irritating, but I get to read a good book, maybe watch a movie, and I get to be in a wonderful place at the end of the trip.
Carl, thanks for helping us imagine what life might look like when you're managing okay. And we'll see you here in Winnipeg soon, I hope.
I've been there a few times. I lived in Regina, so we used to go to Winnipeg for excitement. Only people from Regina can say that.
Hey,
and Brandon.
Brandon, too, of course. Carl, thank you, and take good care.
My pleasure. Bye-bye now.
Carl Moore, Associate Professor of Strategy and Management at McGill University. We reached him in Montreal.
Rubik's, Jigsaw, Wordle? Hardly. Get ready, Canada. It's time for another edition of That's Puzzling. Host Pia Chattopadhyay competes against one familiar voice and one clever listener in a battle of brain games devised by puzzle master Peter Brown. That's Puzzling all summer long. Friday afternoon at 1:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app. Jarrett Martineau hosts Reclaimed.
In an hour, you could hear everything from powwow music to like a soft acoustic ballad to an electronic record to like a dub track, all in the same hour from an Indigenous artist from any part of the world. Eclecticism is an overused word, obviously, but I think the sheer diversity that gets represented on the show is something that's totally unique.
Reclaimed with Jarrett Martineau. Available now on CBC Listen.
29 and a half minutes after 6 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, everywhere on the CBC Listen app, and of course on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Thanks very much for watching us, and hello to the folks as well watching on CBC Television. Lots to come in our next half hour. Tariffs and trade continue to be top of mind in the nation's capital. We'll go to Ottawa and check in with Alex Ballingall with the Toronto Star for his thoughts on what to expect in the coming weeks. Coming up after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, sunshine is back in our forecast again. So is a seasonal temperature, a high today of 26. Once again, though, we will see some local smoke in the air as Winnipeg and much of Manitoba now under a special air quality statement. Parts of the north are under an air quality warning. People in Leaf Rapids have until 10 this morning to get out of town. The northern community is being evacuated as 2 wildfires burn nearby. One threatens power lines. The other threatens the only road in and out. Liz Sherrier lives in Leaf Rapids and says it's scary.
We don't really know what will happen once we leave, and many people are worried about their homes and what will happen if something happens to our homes. Like, there's so much to be worried about.
The province says about 328 people live in Leaf Rapids. Municipal leaders say buses are available to take them to Winnipeg if they don't have their own vehicles. Once in the city, evacuees are asked to report to the reception centre at the Leela Soccer Complex, and they warn evacuees may need to stay in shelters until hotel rooms are available. An emergency on top of threatening wildfires is smoldering in Thompson. The Firefighters Union says public safety is being compromised due to a shortage of ambulance workers. Eric Campbell believes lives are being put at risk because the union and the city of Thompson aren't talking. In the last few days, Campbell says there have been instances where only one ambulance was available to serve a city of 13,000 people.
The fact that we're the ones dealing with the call volume and we kind of know what's needed, we've always said that 3 full-time ambulances running daytime and nighttime is what is needed for a city with as high of a demand of emergency services as Thompson has.
Campbell says low pay and heavy workload have left a vacancy rate of more than 50% in the Thompson ambulance service. He wants to discuss that with the mayor and council. The province acknowledges Thompson needs a new model for ambulance service. A First Nations elder says a WestJet agent denied him boarding because of his photo ID. Lawrence Douglas Corbier was traveling from Montreal home to Winnipeg on June 30th. He says when he showed his Indian status card as identification, the boarding agent told him the card had expired. But the card was issued in 2024 and is valid until February 2029. Corbier's friend David Harper says when he called WestJet customer service, they didn't even know what an Indian status card was.
They start asking, is he from India? That's totally ignorant of them, how WestJet doesn't teach their staff in that sense, where culturally sensitivity should be at the forefront of this company.
Harper says eventually WestJet rebooked Corbier on a different flight the next day and put him up in a hotel. Corbier says he is still shaken by the experience. In an email to CBC, WestJet apologizes for the inconvenience and says it is contacting Corbier. Canada has less than 2 weeks to negotiate a new trade deal with the U.S., or this country could face tariffs from the White House. U.S. President Donald Trump just announced the new tariff rates that some countries will face August 1st, but the deadline for Canada is July 21st. To the White House, where U.S. President Trump had dinner last night with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
It's an honor to have Bibi and Sarah with us, friends of mine for a long time, and we had a tremendous success together.
The two leaders discussed war in Gaza and how to end it. And before the dinner started, Netanyahu made a surprise move to flatter the American president.
I want to present to you, Mr. President, the letter I sent to the Nobel Prize Committee. It's nominating you for the Peace Prize, which is well deserved, and you should get it.
Thank you very much. This I didn't know. Wow. Thank you very much. Coming from you in particular, this is very meaningful.
Trump also said he hopes the war between Israel and Iran is over. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. An advocate for urban forests and infill housing is the first candidate to register in Winnipeg's Elmwood East Kildonan civic by-election. Emma Durand Wood lives in the Glen Elm neighborhood, where she has pushed the city to plant and protect more trees.
Trees are a big one for me. I think we've made lots of progress through better funding of urban forestry, but we need to keep working at that. There's lots and lots of parts of this neck of the woods that need a lot more trees.
Elmwood East Kildonan has been vacant since the death of City Councillor Jason Schreier in April. The by-election to replace Schreier takes place on October 25th. You can find the latest news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Heather Wells joining us from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. We're at 35 minutes after 6 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. Magandang umaga, good morning, Manitoba. I'm in for Marcy Marcusa. Brad Lilly's our streaming producer, and you're probably watching us as well on CBC Television, so good morning. Marshall Hodgins on the controls today, and Sierra Sanders, of course, is our studio director following the commute. Let's talk about the weather here. We do have some air quality advisories in effect for Thompson, for that region because of wildfire smoke, so be aware of that. For Winnipeg, there's also a special air quality statement in effect, so you might be impacted by forest fire smoke. Expecting another sunny day, as you heard from your news today, for Winnipeg, with some foggy patches becoming local smoke. High of 26 degrees. Brandon, sunny. Some fog as well, turning to local smoke. High of 25. Dauphin, sunny. And a high of 26 degrees for Thompson. That widespread smoke continues, high of 27. Up in Churchill, sunny today, then sun and cloud mix as the day progresses with a chance of showers and a risk of a thunderstorm, high of 28. Right now in Winnipeg, partly cloudy, 11, foggy and 8 in Brandon, misty and 7 in Dauphin, smoke at the airport in Thompson and 12 degrees, and at Churchill, at the airport there, mainly sunny conditions and 15 degrees. Sierra Sanders is back for a look at your commute so far. Good morning.
Good morning, Faith. It's been very quiet on the commuter line so far this morning. Things are moving along smoothly here in the first hour of the show, and as people start to wake up for their mornings and for their days. If there's something slowing you down out there, whether you are here in the city or out on the highways, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line, 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks very much. Sierra Sanders, our studio director here on the program. Let's head to your CBC National Business Desk, and Phil Dumont joining us now with a business report. Good morning.
Morning, Faith.
Phil, Ottawa has made a number of new spending commitments, as we've been hearing. Where does that leave us in terms of the federal deficit?
Yeah, it's that time of the year where a lot of institutes and banks and those types come out with estimates of government spending and the deficits, and usually there's a lot of high numbers because they throw everything but the kitchen sink in there. This time around, it will be a blizzard of red ink. The question is how much. Last week, the C.D. Howe Institute floated the idea that the deficit could reach $92 billion. At the time, it sounded a bit outlandish. New estimate from the Bank of Montreal says maybe $80 billion. That would be 2.5% of Canada's GDP. BMO's Robert Kasich says there's a number of encouraging factors. Ottawa's commitment to boost defense spending, let's say the 5% target, but they're focused on the 2% target of GDP that would hit this year. That's $8 billion nobody was anticipating when the year began. Carney's government's also scrapped a chunk of the carbon tax, introduced a small income tax cut, a bunch of other bits and bytes. That's $7 billion in lost government revenue. Then there are the tariffs. We tend to think of we tend to focus on the American tariffs on our exports going there. But Ottawa had been counting on about $20 billion in revenue from our tariffs on U.S. exports coming up here. With all the back and forth with Washington on trade, Kasich figures we can only count on $5 to $10 billion of that money, so that's at least a $10 billion shortfall. And finally, Bank of Montreal thinks Canada's economy will keep slowing into the fall, winter months. We shrank in the second quarter. BMO figures will shrink in the third quarter as well, and that could hurt government revenues again. So the estimates were, if you took the Parliamentary Budget Office, $47 billion, the Liberal Election Platform, $62 billion. BMO says, no, those are all pipe dreams now. If it's any consolation, deficit 2.5% of GDP. In the U.S., their deficit's tracking at 6% of the country's economy.
Phil, let's talk about Washington's new tax bill. Yeah. How might it kill the American gambling industry?
Yeah, it's the law of unintended consequences. The big, beautiful bill went through, and I think nobody noticed this much except some gamblers. You might hate all the ads, but it's big dollars now. $15 billion gambling in Canada, 72 in the States. But the new U.S. law limits the level of gambling losses that a player can write off against their winnings, 100% down to 90%. Sounds minor, but experts say could be a big problem, especially for the casual bettor. Here's the scenario, because you got to do these, it's a math issue. So let's say you bet all year and you make $200,000, but you lose $210,000. So you're underwater. You shouldn't have to pay tax. And in the old law, you didn't, because you could use the losses to shelter all of that $200,000 in income and have $10,000 of losses left over. The new law, 90%, lets you only write off $189,000 of your earnings. That means you have of your losses. You go, that means you have $11,000 that you have to pay tax on. Now you go, well, it's not a big amount. Yeah, but you lost money. That's not how this tax system is supposed to work. If you lose money, you shouldn't have to pay tax. In this case, you are. It's probably more of a problem for the once-in-a-while gambler. I suspect it's because they lose more often than it does the pro player.
Business cards. What is the value of them these days?
You think nothing, but turns out more than I thought anyway. UK survey, it's a rare species now. 70% of respondents said they don't see the need for a business card at all. This stuff's all digital. Only 23% said they handed out one at all. But if you have the right card, you can cash in. Turns out there's a growing market for cards from famous people. Kind of like, hockey cards, baseball cards, that kind of thing. Top on the list, signed Steve Jobs card worth $181,000 US.
What?
Yeah, I know. Number 2, Elon Musk's signed card, $39,000, a big drop, but still, that's $39,000 for a piece of paper. Down the list, if you have a card of Sigmund Freud's, I didn't even know he had cards, but apparently he did, $6,000. So a big drop to actually somebody who really, in one sense, really matters. The cards are more valuable if they're signed, but you can still get a decent return if they're not. That's signed Steve Jobs card, $181,000. If you just have a card, and I probably had one at some trade show years and years ago, $15,000.
No kidding. Tell you what, Phil, I'll try and find an old card, sign it. It probably will be worth like a penny or something. I know you don't have pennies anymore.
I have to pay people to take my card.
There you go. The markets, how are the numbers doing this morning?
Well, you had those letters going out from Washington to countries saying you're getting hit with tariffs, and the markets are actually up. Germany, the UK up marginally. France is down, but only a little bit. Japan got one of those letters, but the Nikkei in Japan up 0.25%. Hong Kong is up 1%. Oil down 19 cents, $67.74. Gold's off $6, $3,337 an ounce. Canadian dollar, it's up marginally, 73.28 cents US.
Phil, have a good one. Take care.
Same to you, Faith.
Thanks very much. Phil DeBond from your CBC National Business Desk. We're at just about 43 minutes after 6 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, Information Radio. I'm Faith Fundal in for Marcy Marcusa. The French poet Baudelaire once wrote, "Sometimes you find an old bottle from which the soul returns." He was talking about perfume. What Baudelaire knew is that smell is powerful. It can stir up memories and make us feel emotional, bring things up emotionally as well, which, as CBC producer Ellis Cho discovers, is probably why Canadians are willing to pay big money to pass the sniff test.
It's just like a condensed milk, fresh and sweet and powdery.
That's Paulina Flagontova. She's describing her favorite fragrance, Dali Mania. But it's not the only one in her collection.
I'll show you. On the top shelf is the perfumes that I'm wearing right now. On the second shelf, we have more luxury perfumes.
She keeps all the bottles in their original boxes and organizes them on different shelves in her bedroom.
On the third shelf, we have perfumes are in budget segment. They are also good. I love them.
Paulina calls herself a perfume addict. She has 216 different fragrances. She wears different ones every day, depending on how she feels.
Today I want this, tomorrow I want this, and I can change the perfumes 2-3 times a day, and all of this depends on my mood.
Fragrance is a nearly $880 million industry in Canada. Normally, sales increase slowly on an annual basis. But in the last 2 years, sales jumped by more than 50%.
Fragrance has been one of the fastest growing categories in the last 3 years. And on average, we see consumers spending more. So it's not that they're buying more units, but they're also spending more on average.
Alexandra Hankus is an analyst for the NPD Group, a market research firm that tracks the beauty industry. She says during the pandemic, cosmetic sales dropped and fragrance sales spiked.
It's that little luxury that you treat yourself to. Then, you were at home, you couldn't really travel too much during the restrictions, but it really was very like an uptick in everybody's emotional health.
Rachel Hers is a neuroscientist who specializes in the psychology of smell. She's not surprised at all that perfume became popular during the pandemic.
Because people need to feel something emotionally more intense when the rest of their life feels out of control.
She says consumers may have picked up the habit during the pandemic, and now we're sticking with it because she says fragrance has the power to lift our mood.
Often it is actually connected to a much more involved experience, like this is reminding me of somebody or some place, or giving me the feeling of being transported to, a completely other space. So scent changes our mindset, and it changes our mindset in a very emotional way.
Paulina Flugantova calls it aromatherapy.
For me, perfume is about happiness, about mood improvement, or to relax, for example.
Relaxing for her, maybe. Not everyone's a fan of fragrance. Like, what about her husband, who lives and works with her in their small one-bedroom apartment?
My husband have full anosmia. It's absolute absence of smellability.
So he can't smell anything.
This is not a problem for him, and all of my perfumes are not a problem for him. And this is my advantage. Yeah, I'm lucky.
For the cost of living, I'm Ellis Cho.
For more stories about how money shapes our lives in ways big and small, you can check out the Cost of Living podcast wherever you hear your podcasts, or catch the show later this morning at 11:30. We're at 12 and a half minutes before 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. Sierra Sanders back in studio now for an update on the commute. You have an update from someone?
Yes, good morning. Joseph called. The lights at Lachaudière and Dugald are completely out in all directions, so they weren't even flashing. So might have been a power outage or just something had happened there that the lights are completely out, no flashing. And when I spoke with him a few minutes ago, he said that there was no one on the scene there. So be careful at that intersection. Proceed with caution. Have some patience with your fellow commuters. I did take a quick look at the live traffic map on Google, and it was showing dark red, which means slow.
We don't like that.
We don't like to see that. We do not like to see that on our morning commute. So just be careful there at Lachaudière and Dugald. The lights are completely out there, so no flashing or anything. And when I spoke to Joseph, it sounded like there was no one on the scene quite yet. If you have any updates on that intersection, or if anything else is slowing you down out there, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line, 204-788-3093.
Jacques Plante pioneered the goalie mask, but in 1959, the notion of donning gear to protect your face was met with plenty of criticism, even from his coach, Toe Blake.
You can't do this, Jacques. It's never been done before. You can't see down with that thing.
Rejecting the goalie mask. From the creators of Under the Influence comes We Regret to Inform You. Wednesday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland, and on demand on CBC Listen.
Partly cloudy and 11 degrees here in downtown Winnipeg. We are expecting a temperature high of 26 degrees for Winnipeg today, so back to summer conditions. Some foggy patches turning into local smoke this morning as well. We do have a special air quality statement in effect for Winnipeg. If you are in Thompson, there is an air quality warning there because of widespread smoke. Expecting a temperature high of 27 degrees. Right now at the airport in Thompson, smoky conditions and 12 degrees. About 10 minutes before 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. And the summer of trade has begun following a spring of trade uncertainty with the U.S. We've seen a flurry of tariff announcements coming from Washington. For more on where Canada sits, we've reached Alex Bollingal, Deputy Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star, joining us from Ottawa. Good morning, Alex.
Hey, good morning.
President Trump spent yesterday posting more letters to world leaders on Truth Social, announcing new tariffs set to kick in from August. What are we hearing from Ottawa?
I think basically the vibe here yesterday and today was kind of warily watching what's going on and hoping it doesn't impact Canada in a way that makes a tricky situation even worse. There hasn't been a huge expectation that what Trump was doing this week would directly impact Canada, but it's Trump we're talking about. It's all, anything is possible. He's very unpredictable. But basically what he's been doing is there was this deadline on Wednesday related to the quote-unquote Liberation Day reciprocal tariffs that he announced back in April. People might remember when he had this huge placard that he was holding at the White House with the list of countries and just the tariff level that he was going to unilaterally impose upon them. And then they gave themselves 90 days to negotiate these deals. There hasn't been very many of them. Now they've kicked that deadline to August 1st from Wednesday, and he's sending these letters to various countries saying, this will be your new tariff if there's no deal, 25%, 25%, 36%. Canada is dealing with its own separate succession of Trump tariffs that are separate from these Liberation Day tariffs. Tariffs justified by the border concerns that Trump has, and tariffs on automakers, and tariffs on steel and aluminum. That's kind of been our trade war. So it's been a different thing than the Liberation Day tariffs. But, Trump could do anything. We never know. Really, he could post on Truth Social right now that he's upset with Canada about something. So,
right.
Warily watching, but with not a huge expectation that this would directly impact us as talks continue kind of on our aspect of the Trump chaos, which is the succession of tariffs that he's imposed upon us since the winter.
In terms of leverage, what does Canada have? What can we do if we don't have a deal by July 21st?
Well, that's there's kind of three options, I guess. July 21st is sort of this soft deadline they're trying to get a deal by then. The options range from they keep talking to Canada kind of ramping up its retaliation. In response to these tariffs, Canada's retaliated with counter tariffs on American imports worth, billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars. It could ramp that up. It could go even further and play even more hardball with, there've been talks earlier in the saga of potentially, restricting exports of things like electricity from Ontario or oil from Alberta. I'm not sure how much of an appetite there is at this point to escalate that, especially with this deadline, and to kind of go that far. But if there is no deal by this kind of agreed to deadline of the 21st, less than 2 weeks away now, people will start asking those questions again of what's Canada going to do next? How are we going to kind of break this logjam that seems to be, if there is no deal, that would seemingly be in place? So there is a range of options, but we'll have to see kind of what happens.
I mean, it's interesting because in the before Donald Trump negotiation styles, you don't often hear things publicly, right? A lot of the things that are said are behind closed doors, including not very nice things. But in the world that we live in now, Donald Trump does things like post on Truth Social, very big policy changes. What do you make of the government's approach in negotiating with them? As to do you think that they're very considerate of not upsetting Donald Trump with public statements?
I think that's probably right. Definitely Carney, since he's become prime minister, since the election, he's met with Trump twice now, and we've kind of observed his interactions with Trump. And one of the things that's jumped out is he's been quite deliberate in making statements that could be perceived as flattering Trump. When he was in the White House in May, just after the election, you said to Trump he's a transformational president. When Trump was in Alberta for the G7, he said, the G7 would be nothing without your leadership and American leadership. So things like that, kind of trying to flatter him, and they seemingly do have at least publicly a warm relationship. So that might be part of the strategy. But there's also been moments of tension, like just less than 2 weeks ago, Trump threatened to blow up the trade talks and walk away and just impose unilaterally whatever tariffs he wanted. Over a tax, called digital services tax, that the federal government has been planning for years. which Trump said would unfairly hit American tech giants with a new tax. Trump threatened to walk away, and then the Carney government, just hours before the tax was going to start getting collected, canceled it and said they'll repeal the law that created it. So quite an example of I think, the leverage that Trump can have over us, given our reliance economically on trade with the United States. That this was an example of him kind of wielding that influence and power over us to force Canada to change a domestic tax policy. So there have definitely been moments of tension amidst the sort of efforts to maintain a openness and warmth personally and directly between Trump and Carney.
The Prime Minister is on a break this week. Where would you say he stands on his promises to shore up the Canadian economy in the face of these tariff threats?
So there's a few things there. Like there's maybe three, I guess, buckets of their plan on that. The first one is removing internal trade barriers, which the provinces are all talking about, and there's been MOUs signed to do this. The government passed a law before the House rose for the summer. That one part of that law was to remove federal trade barriers and barriers to labor mobility. So kind of increasing free trade in Canada to boost the GDP. They're working on that. The other part of that bill I mentioned, probably more controversially, is about creating this new, almost emergency-style process to fast-track major projects, pipelines, ports, electricity grids, mines. We'll have to see what they approve, but it could be any of those things. Get them built and approved way faster in a process that has raised concerns potentially about respecting environmental standards and Indigenous rights. So that's something to watch for how that plays out in the coming weeks. And then I guess the third thing's probably trying to deepen economic and trade relations with the countries other than the United States, which has been sort of like internal trade, kind of something that people have talked about for years, but has taken on a renewed urgency given how vulnerable we are to Trump's whims, given our exposure and reliance on the American economy and what he's doing with his, sort of mercantilist, protectionist, whatever you want to call it, trade policies against much of the world. So they're working on those kind of three things, and we'll have to see how it goes. I think that's kind of, aside from dealing with Trump, making progress on those things is kind of the other side of the coin to the mandate that Carney got on the April 28th election. So, the heat is on for him to show progress on those things for sure.
Alex, always good to have you. Thank you and take care.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Alex Bollingal is Deputy Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star. Let's head to our CBC Winnipeg local news desk, and Heather Wells joining us now. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, the clock is ticking. Just 3 hours now until people in Leaf Rapids have to be out of town. The northern town is being evacuated as 2 wildfires burn nearby. Around 328 people live in Leaf Rapids, and municipal leaders say buses are available to take them to Winnipeg if they don't have their own transportation. And an advocate for infill housing and urban forests, Emma Durand Wood, is the first candidate to register in Winnipeg's Winnipeg's Elmwood East Kildonan by-election. That City Hall seat has been vacant since the death of Councillor Jason Schreier in April. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 7:30.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. I'm Faith Fundal in for Marcy Marcusa. Good morning and hello to the folks watching on CBC television. I guess I should say goodbye because you'll be leaving. But you can continue watching us on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. Sierra Sanders, our studio director, and Marshall Hudgens on the controls. Stay tuned because in our next half hour, we'll hear from a Winnipeg teen, one of 15 students to receive a full ride scholarship to the University of Toronto. More from them coming up after a World Report. Stay tuned.
Today on The Current.
Greatest honor you can have as a Canadian citizen, so I'm very happy.
I'm Megan Williams. 83 Canadians have been named as the newest recipients of the Order of Canada for everything from excellence in harmonica playing to trying to solve the issue of homelessness. We'll hear from some of them coming up on The Current.
The Current, this morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. It is a promise Prime Minister Mark Carney has made repeatedly to look to allies other than the United States to rearm Canada's military, but industry sources say Ottawa is about to award a major defense contract to a U.S. company. The CBC's Kate McKenna reports.
Canada can work towards a new international set of partnerships.
While announcing new defense spending last month, Prime Minister Mark Carney expressed two clear priorities: rearming the Canadian military and reducing Canada's reliance on the United States.
We can pursue deeper alliances with stable democracies.
But defense experts say Canada is set to award a contract for night vision binoculars worth more than $100 million to an American company because the technical requirements to bid on the contract are so narrow that only one company in the world qualifies. The request for proposals closes later today. The French manufacturer Photonis sells night vision devices to other NATO allies. In a statement, it says it tried to convince Canadian officials that its criteria don't follow industry norms.
I don't have the details, but I will look into it.
Defense Minister David McGuinty couldn't explain why, but says Canada is standing by its goal to rely less on the United States.
Going forward, we're looking, of course, to work with other partners.
Dave Perry is a defense expert with the Canadian Global Affairs Institute. He says uncoupling Canada's military procurement from the United States could take time.
We have not gotten to a space where we're investing 75 cents of every dollar in the U.S. market by accident.
He says until recently, Canada's policy was to work closely with the United States, and he says they have been the world's leading arms market for generations. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
Canada and Japan have signed a new security agreement. It allows both countries to share classified information relating to national security matters. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand is in Tokyo for the signing ceremony.
It is a critical step forward on all counts. It gives Canada and Japan the tools that we need to strengthen our security partnership, which is so very important in times of global challenge.
Anand will also travel to Malaysia for meetings with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. The trip to the Indo-Pacific region is part of the Carney government's strategy to shift trade relations away from the United States. The number of confirmed deaths from the floods in Texas has now surpassed 100. The number of missing is not clear. Search efforts are nonstop, but there is little hope of finding more survivors. The CBC's Katie Nicholson has more from Kerrville, Texas.
You have to be standing next to it to really get a perspective of how tall this is. It's maybe 40 feet high.
Tom Carlson hits play on a video of an 18-wheel trailer swept up by the Guadalupe River, now deeply embedded in the muddy banks nearby of what remains of a Kerrville park.
I couldn't believe it. You just don't realize the power of rushing water.
Carlson's elderly parents had their own close call when the waters rose.
We got a call from them at 4:45 in the morning, and they were in their pickup moving up behind the house because the water was coming up so fast. And they're 88 years old.
There was no official flood warning at that hour, but they were lucky.
A neighbor knocked on their door, and I guess a tree had floated down on the neighbor's property and hit their front door, and everything gushed in.
Throughout the region, sometimes called Flash Flood Alley, backhoes and boats comb through the waters and mud for the missing, while those who have survived grapple with grief and the need for disaster assistance, like Auburn Gallagher in Sandy Creek, utterly isolated by floodwaters.
I know we're not San Angelo or San Antonio, but hell, we're human beings. Help us. Give us what we need. We don't want to be the stepchildren anymore.
Help is on the way. California, Florida, and Mexico have sent professional search, rescue, and recovery teams. But the true toll of this disaster still weeks away from being fully understood. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Kerrville, Texas.
King Charles is welcoming French President Emmanuel Macron at Windsor Castle today. It is the first official state visit by a French president to Britain since 2008. Macron's visit is considered a step towards mending broken ties between the UK and France post-Brexit. But there is heightened tension in Europe over the war in Ukraine and migrant crossings. The CBC's Anna Cunningham is in London with the latest.
I think it's a very important visit,
says Sylvie Berman, the former French ambassador to the UK. Today marks a reset in closer political ties between Britain and France post-Brexit, when the UK voted to leave the European Union.
We have a close cooperation on defence issues.
Berman says Ukraine will be a focus. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and President Emmanuel Macron due to hold a call during the visit with President Volodymyr Zelensky. Both countries have spearheaded the so-called Coalition of the Willing, a group including Canada ready to back Ukraine. Later, President Macron will address the British Parliament. Irregular migration will also be a focus, with the issue of how to stop people smuggling across the English Channel. This past week, some 2,000 crossed illegally, nearly 20,000 in the past 6 months.
They're trying with small boats all along the coast,
says Berman. Peter Walsh from the Migration Observatory says conflict in some countries pushes migration.
Wars are getting worse, civil or ethnic conflicts are intensifying. Countries like Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Eritrea, Yemen.
The UK is paying France to try to stop the crossings. Recently, French police seen slashing the inflatable boats with knives in shallow waters. King Charles will avoid the complex political discussions, but like his opening of Parliament in Ottawa in May, this state visit will see the monarch's soft diplomacy at play. Anna Cunningham, CBC News, London.
Federal, provincial and territorial leaders are meeting in Quebec today to talk trade, specifically trade between provinces and territories. The Committee on Internal Trade is meeting one day after a new report was released by the Centre for Policy Alternatives. It questions the benefits of breaking down internal trade barriers. The CBC's Olivia Stefanovic joins me now from Ottawa. And Olivia, what are we expecting from this meeting?
Well, these leaders are meeting in Quebec City to try to make more progress on breaking down trade barriers within Canada. Now, these are restrictions that prevent the flow of goods across the country and professionals from being able to work in any province or territory without being recertified. Now, Canadian politicians have tried to remove these barriers for decades, but they've stepped up efforts significantly in recent months after U.S. President Donald Trump began threatening Canada. Chrystia Freeland is the federal minister responsible for internal trade.
We're going to be doing things like focusing on labor mobility. If you can work as a nurse in Edmonton, you should be able to work as a nurse in Halifax. We want Canadians to be able to drive a truck from Halifax all the way to Vancouver, and getting rid of all of those barriers to internal trade can make all Canadians a little bit richer.
So far, we've seen several provinces make deals with each other to improve trade and labor mobility. Just yesterday, we saw Alberta and Ontario sign 2 new agreements with each other, and Ottawa removed all remaining federal restrictions on internal trade by July 1st, which was a deadline set out by Prime Minister Mark Carney on the federal election campaign trail.
What can you tell us about this new report from the Centre for Policy Alternatives?
Well, this report pours cold water on the benefits of removing internal trade barriers. It says many of these restrictions, be it fish processing, language, or timber rules, they're in place for good reason, and removing them could pose risks. Now, Freeland was asked to respond to these findings on CBC's Power and Politics last night. She didn't deny that there are different estimates for how much of a benefit we might see by removing these barriers, but because the U.S. is no longer a reliable trading partner, she says that Canadian politicians have no choice but to try to do whatever they can to strengthen Canada's economy.
Thank you, Olivia.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Olivia Stefanovic in Ottawa. It's a maiden voyage for Iron Maiden. For the first time, the British heavy metal band is featured on a UK coin. The Royal Mint is commemorating 50 years since the band's formation, and it's 50 years of hair swooping and headbanging. The coin features the band's mascot, Eddie, and it is available now on the Mint's website in silver, gold, or with a color print. Rock on, Iron Maiden. Rock on. That is World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Maganing umaga, good morning Manitoba. Faith Wendell here in Studio 15 at Portage and Spence. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I think I'd like to see Marcia Young rock on. Be fun, wouldn't it? Lots to come on the program in this half hour. It has been almost 2 weeks since Portage and Main opened up to pedestrians, and there is a pretty big celebration happening today. We're going to speak with the Downtown Biz about all of the exciting plans that it has coming up here on the program. Ever wondered how our society has gained the trust of animals to be able to help them? We're going to hear from a local veterinarian who wrote a book all about the history of the veterinary arts. First, though, we're going to meet a grade 12 Maples collegiate student who just won a $100,000 scholarship to the University of Toronto, one of 15 recipients. Stay tuned for that conversation coming up next here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. First, though, to your CBC Winnipeg local news desk, Heather Wells joining us. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a First Nations elder says he was denied boarding by a WestJet agent because of his photo ID. Lawrence Douglas Corbier was traveling from Montreal back to Winnipeg June 30th. He says when he showed his Indian status card, his photo ID, the agent told him to step aside. He ended up missing his flight. We're going to hear what happened there. And people in Leaf Rapids only have less than 3 hours to go until they have to get out of town. A mandatory evacuation is in place in that northern community because of wildfires burning nearby. We'll hear the latest in our next local news at 7:30.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells joining us from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 94.5 FM in Leaf Rapids, 100.9 FM in Thompson, and of course on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. Good morning. Marshall Hodgins on the controls today, and Sierra Sanders, our studio director. Before Sierra gets here, we should talk about the weather because we are expecting a return to, after a couple of days of rain, the wet stuff, back to our regular summer conditions. Sunny today expected for Winnipeg and a temperature high of 26 degrees. The sun's already coming out. That will turn to local smoke, though, so there is a special air quality statement in effect. For Brandon today, similar forecast, sunny with some foggy patches becoming into turning to local smoke. High of 25 degrees. Dauphin, sunny and some fog, then turning to local smoke. High of 26 degrees. There is an air quality advisory for Thompson and widespread smoke expected today and a high of 27. And sunny, then sun and cloud mixture for Churchill and a high of 28. In the airport, or at the airport, I should say, partly cloudy conditions, 17 degrees in Churchill. Thompson, smoky and 14. Misty in Dauphin and 10. Foggy at the airport in Brandon and 9 degrees. It's been a thing this morning for the commute, Sierra Sanders. Good morning.
Yes, it has. So originally I had a call from Joseph telling me that the lights were blank at Lagimodiere and Dugald there. So they weren't flashing, completely blank. Could have been a power outage or another situation. But he called. And then I also got an update from Owen while we were in the news that those lights are still out. They are completely blank. So you want to make sure you're treating that intersection as a 4-way stop. And it is started. It's when I spoke to Owen, it sounded like it was still quite backed up. And so, make sure you're treating that intersection as a 4-way stop. So that's Lagimodiere and Dugald Road there. And be patient with your fellow commuters and be kind to one another while you are out there. If you have an update on that situation or any other situation, whether you are here in the city or out on the highways, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line, 204-788-3093.
14 minutes after 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. A Winnipeg student is now a national scholar. Her name is Bisman Randua, and she is a grade 12 student at Maples Collegiate, just awarded a huge scholarship at the University of Toronto. She is among the thousands of students across the country nominated for a national scholarship. It's worth more than $100,000, and it covers everything from tuition to residence fees up to 4 years of study. Randowa checked all those boxes as a UNESCO student representative. She is employed as a page at the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba. She does plenty of volunteer work as a cabinet member for the Youth Parliament of Manitoba, and she does it all living with a visual impairment. Bisman joins us on the line now. Good morning. Welcome.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for having me.
How do you feel hearing someone describe all of those accomplishments?
It always feels very odd because I'm used to seeing other people get described, so it feels really weird to be in that position now.
And $100,000, I mean, that's not an insignificant amount of money. What does getting something like this mean to you?
It's very surreal. The U of T has been a dream of mine since I was very young, so being able to be a national scholar now is, it doesn't feel real. I don't think it's really clicked to me yet that I'll be going there in the fall.
Do you know what you want to study or what you want to get out of your studies at the U of T?
Yeah, hopefully something related to like public policy or political science. I haven't really decided yet, but something related to that, hopefully.
I understand you to be nominated, to be considered for the award, you had to be nominated. That sounds like an intensive process. What was it like?
Yeah, you definitely have to ask your high school administration, guidance. It was definitely a couple weeks of going back and forth with them and seeing if I was the best student candidate. But once that is done, you just have an application process ahead, which is not as bad as a nomination, but still quite daunting.
Do you remember what that conversation was like with the folks who would nominate you? How did you convince them, or what's your sense of how you convinced them?
I think I was very eager. I had my eyes set on this award for a very long time, so I kind of knew I really have to get in there. Early September, I have to go and ask them. I have to tell them about all the clubs and extracurriculars I did. And my school was quite familiar with me and my work already, so I think that definitely helped. But it was just a little bit of back and forth, telling them, this is what I do. I think I fit the criteria for this award. And then they did their own research on the website as well.
I mean, you're describing things that suggest that you're a very, very you're essentially good at organizing things. How do you keep yourself managing through all of that? Because you do so many things. How do you do it?
Thank you so much. I feel like I am also one of the biggest procrastinators I know. So I leave everything to the last minute. But I think I always keep a mental note of things that need to be done. And I'm very good at planning my school year. So I always know I'm going to join this, this, and this. And I think that's really helped me in my journey because it's allowed me to really optimize my time. I usually do a lot of research before I join things, so I know exactly what I'm getting into. But yeah, I think a big part of it is just growth and learning to slowly manage my time as my course load and schedule gets heavier. But mostly it's just good pre-planning and really bad procrastination when the time comes.
I'm glad to thank you for the validation for the procrastination. I think there are a lot of folks who are listening who are probably thinking, yep, I procrastinate too. You were talking about your journey here, and you've described your visual impairment as a power rather than a burden. Why was it important for you to characterize it in that way?
I think a lot of times when folks have impairments or disabilities, or even for myself, sometimes we categorize them as an inability to do something or a lack of something. But I think for me specifically, throughout the years and navigating high school, I've grown to see it as a new perspective and a way to see things that are often overlooked at the intersection of different categories. So for me, my visual impairment is kind of like an enabler of growth and a way for me to really explore things that I wouldn't necessarily be interested in.
Do you remember I wonder, do you remember the moment that you realized, this is a superpower. This is something that has allowed me to see things that others don't see, or think about stuff that other people haven't thought about. Do you remember a moment where that became so clear or so obvious to you?
I think definitely sometimes when I think it was, for me, it was really like a debate competition. And it was when I had like a script in front of me and I couldn't see what was on the script because I printed it very, very small. So I started just speaking from the heart, and it was about an issue related to climate action. And to me, that was something I was quite interested in at the time. So I started speaking more with passion. And after the end of that speech, I was like, wow, I didn't really need a script, like I didn't really need to doubt my abilities. And from that moment, I think I really started taking an initiative in youth leadership. And I was really like, okay, like, you know a lot, like you just need to like start putting yourself out there and go for things. Don't let your vision just be a limitation. And like for sports, I used to really like volleyball, but then I realized like sometimes I wasn't able to see the ball or like aim correctly. So I was focusing my attention in other areas. And for me, my voice was something that I had and something that I could utilize.
Speaking of your voice, there may be folks out there listening, or even parents, who they recognize people in their circles may have big dreams, just like you. Maybe folks who also manage visual impairments, but maybe don't see it the same way you do in terms of using it as a superpower. What message do you have for people who are listening who might fit in any of those categories?
Honestly, I think the best thing that people can do for themselves is really listen to their hearts and choose their passion over profession. I think a lot of times we are so caught up in becoming an idolized version of ourselves, or like really upholding the image that we want to send to people. And, me being on a radio show and talking about my accomplishments is definitely not the best way to really describe this, because it is something that I really want, and it's a great thing. But I think overall, just being able to express ourselves and our passions and really who we are for our true identities and our true skin, I think is something that is so valuable, and using it to really guide us towards the people we want to be, the initiatives we want to do, and overall just the vibes and positivity we want to send out into the world, I think is something that is so important. So I really encourage people to look beyond like what they think they should do and really try to pursue something that they want to do.
Bisman, I look forward very much to chatting with you again, and getting to hear about the things you want to do as well. Congratulations, and take good care.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
That's Bisman Randawa, one of the 15 recipients of the University of Toronto National Scholarship. It's worth $100,000.
Listen up to groundbreaking sounds. Listen up to new and emerging artists. Listen up to what's happening with your favorite musicians. Subscribe now to CBC Music's newsletter, Listen Up. Keep tabs on everything happening in music. News, exclusive live performances, the best new songs, and so much more. Subscribe now at cbc.ca/listenup.
23 minutes after 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. And perfect segue to this next tune. Winnipeg singer-songwriter Leith Ross saying that this next song came from a place of, quote, radical optimism. This is called I Can See the Future. Leslie Thross with I Can See the Future. 25 minutes after 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, and someone who might be able to also see the future, Scott Regier from our CBC National Sports Desk. See what I tried there? I tried to connect it.
Yeah. And I cannot see the future, by the way.
Well, you can see enough because we've been talking about the Blue Jays' charmed summer, and it continues, doesn't it?
It does, Faith. And the team's youngsters were behind it last night. Joey Loperfido, Addison Barger, and Nathan Lucas, they all had home runs in a decisive road win over the White Sox, which was Toronto's 9th straight victory. Jose Barrios, he was on the mound. He pitched 6 innings, only allowed 1 run before he shared his thoughts.
This year, we got guys like 2-3 years in the big league, and right now they're having a lot of success. They're playing the game the right way, so that's fun. I like it, but one thing I've been seeing is we are believing in ourselves. Like, we can go out there and beat any team in the big league, so that's fun, and when we got that confidence, we can make a lot of good things out there.
Here's a good thing, Faith. Toronto now has a record of 53-38, which matches the record for most wins in franchise history before the All-Star break. Ooh. If they beat the White Sox again tonight, they will surpass the number of victories managed by the Jays teams of 1985 and 1992. And if you follow this team and have over the years, you know those clubs in 85 and 92 were pretty good clubs. One of them won the World Series. So
understatement.
Yeah, charm summer, Faith, indeed.
And I hope it continues because in about a couple of weeks or a week and a half or so, whatever the time is, I'm going to be in Toronto and I have Blue Jays tickets. So really hoping that it continues.
And it's good you have them because suddenly, unlike past years, even with $500 million in renovations to their stadium, they've been very easy to get. That's no longer the case.
So glad I got those tickets. What about the Spain's women's soccer team? Because it seems like they're trying to take a page out of the Blue Jays books.
Yeah, charm summer for them as well. La Roja have been the class of the European Championship so far. Yesterday, they obliterated Belgium. Midfielder Alexia Putellas led the charge. She had 2 goals and 2 assists, the first time a player's done that at this tournament. This is Spain's first major event, Faith, since their World Cup win in 2023, where the squad found themselves at the center of a sexism scandal. Following their triumph, the head of the country's soccer federation, Luis Rubiales, kissed one of the team's players non-consensually on the lips. Boycotts and protests followed while a court case found Rubiales guilty of sexual assault. Alexia Putellas says things have changed for the better since then, and the results can be seen on the field.
Looking back in women's soccer, so many things have happened and there have been so many changes made. I personally feel that finally we can just think about playing soccer. We have such better conditions now regarding our trips, our food, our rest, absolutely everything. So we can finally focus on doing our best for this jersey in order to win trophies.
Alexia Putellas, who is the favorite, Faith, to win this year's Ballon d'Or award as the world's best player, and the way her team is going right now, she might just have a European championship on her resume to boot.
Let's finish with tennis here, where a Canadian is trying to add a Wimbledon title to her resume.
Yeah, Ottawa's Gabriela Dabrowski, Faith. She and her partner Aaron Routliffe can win a berth in the doubles semifinals today. They played around 11 this morning Central Time. Dabrowski and Routliffe, who grew up in Caledon, Ontario, made it to the Wimbledon finals last year where they narrowly lost. Meantime, an emotional match yesterday in men's singles.
Something happened. He hurt himself on that volley.
Oh, no. Oh, he's clutching the pectoral. Oh, my goodness.
Bulgaria's Gregor Dimitrov looked headed towards the tournament's biggest upset, leading top-ranked Jannik Sinner 2-0, but as you heard there, he hurt his pectoral muscle during a serve and had to retire from the match. Sinner shared his condolences.
I don't know what to say because he is an incredible player. Seeing him in this position, it's honestly, if there would be a chance that he could play, the next round, he would deserve. But now, mostly, I hope he has a speedy recovery. Very, very unlucky from his side. I don't take this as a win at all.
So unfortunate for the 34-year-old Dimitrov, missing out on one of the biggest upsets of his career. He and Sinner are very close friends, and you can hear the affection in Sinner's voice there.
Scott Regier, we'll talk to you tomorrow. Take care.
Sounds good.
Thanks very much. Scott Regier from your CBC National Sports Desk. More to come after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it's 12 degrees. We're headed to a seasonal high of 26. Lots of sunshine today. A little bit of local smoke thrown in there as well. People in Leaf Rapids have just a few hours left to get out of town. A mandatory evacuation is in place in that northern community because of wildfires burning nearby. Liz Sherrier is among the 328 people getting ready to leave.
We have 2 fires that are threatening. One is threatening the power lines, and the other is also threatening our one and only road in and out. So that's big concern. It's causing some anxiety.
Evacuees will be heading to Winnipeg. The province says buses are scheduled to leave Leaf Rapids around 8:30 this morning in just 1 hour, and everyone needs to be out by 10. Once in Winnipeg, evacuees are asked to report to the reception centre at the Leela Soccer Complex. A First Nations elder says he was denied boarding by a WestJet agent because of his photo ID. Lawrence Douglas Corbier was traveling from Montreal back home to Winnipeg on June 30th. He says when he showed his Indian status card as photo ID, the agent told him to step aside and wait.
She told me it was expired. It was my Indian status card, but it wasn't expired. She forgot to look on the top of it.
Corbier's status card was issued last year and is valid until 2029. He ended up missing his flight and eventually was rebooked on another flight the next day. Corbier says he is still shaken and will never fly WestJet again. The Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs calls the incident heartbreaking and unacceptable. In an email to CBC, the airline apologizes and says it is reaching out to Corbier. The Firefighters Union in Thompson says public safety is being compromised because of a shortage of ambulance workers. Eric Campbell believes lives are being put at risk because the union and the city of Thompson aren't talking. In the last few days, Campbell says there have been instances where only one ambulance was available to serve a city of 13,000 people. He says Thompson needs 3 full-time ambulances.
Public safety should be the number one concern of everybody. That should be the number one concern of the mayor. That should be the number one concern of the council. That should be the number one concern of the service providers, right? How can we do things the best?
Campbell says low pay and heavy workload have resulted in a vacancy rate of more than 50% in the Thompson ambulance service. He wants to discuss the issues with the mayor and the council. To Texas now, where the death toll from flooding has reached 104, and there is growing frustration with the lack of help for people who live in the area. Oberon Gallagher lives in Sandy Creek.
Hell, we're human beings. Help us. Give us what we need.
Dozens of people are still unaccounted for in the flood zone. Search and rescue teams still searching for survivors. U.S. President Donald Trump had dinner at the White House last night with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
It's an honor to have Bibi and Sarah with us, friends of mine for a long time, and we had a tremendous success together.
The two leaders discussed the war in Gaza and how to end it. Before the dinner started, Netanyahu made a surprise move to flatter the American president.
I want to present to you, Mr. President, the letter I sent to the Nobel Prize Committee. It's nominating you for the Peace Prize, which is well-deserved, and you should get it.
Thank you very much. This I didn't know. Wow. Thank you very much. Coming from you in particular, this is very meaningful.
Trump says he hopes the war between Israel and Iran is over. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. An advocate for infill housing and urban forests is the first candidate to register in Winnipeg's Elmwood East Kildonan by-election. Emma Durand-Wood is a writer who was trained as a library technician. She says this city needs to allow more varieties of housing.
There's a single-family house. Let's make it easy to add a secondary suite so that you can have some extra income to help with the mortgage, maybe have an older family member move in with you?
Elmwood East Kildonan has been vacant since the death of Councillor Jason Schreier in April. The by-election to replace Schreier on City Council takes place on October 25th. You can find the latest news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Magandang umaga, good morning Manitoba. Faith Fundal here in Studio 15 at Portage and Spence. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 94.5 FM in Leaf Rapids, 100.9 FM in Thompson, and on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream where you might be watching us as well. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. I'm in for Marcy Marcusa. Lots to come this half hour. First, we're going to talk about the weather, though, because we are expecting a return to what we're used to for summer, at least conditions, at least. Sunny for much of the listening region with fog becoming local smoke. High of 26 for Winnipeg, 25 for Brandon, 26 for Dauphin. There is a air quality warning in effect for Thompson and the region there because of widespread smoke. High of 27 degrees in the forecast today. If you have heart or lung issues, you're asked to avoid strenuous outdoor activity and avoid the outside because it might impact you. Essentially, listen to your body. For Churchill, today sunny, then a mix of sun and cloud with a risk of a thunderstorm this afternoon. Some smoke as well. High of 28 degrees. Right now in Winnipeg, misty and 10. Brandon, foggy and 9. Misty in Dauphin and 12 degrees. Smoke at the airport in Thompson and 14 degrees. And in Churchill this morning, partly cloudy conditions at the airport and a current temperature of 17 degrees. Marshall Hodgins is on the controls today. Sierra Sanders is our studio director. And following the commute so far this morning, kind of been getting a bunch of different things. I know the phone's been ringing. How is it going so far?
It is looking okay out there. It's been a while since I've had a call on the commuter line, but there has been a situation that I've been following most of the morning. I had Joseph and Owen both call about the lights being blank at Lagimodiere and Dugald, and it sounds like that is still the case out there. So you want to make sure you're treating that intersection as a four-way stop. Even though those lights aren't flashing red and they are blank, you still want to treat that as a four-way stop. So make sure you're patient with yourself, you're patient with your fellow commuters there, and just be careful a little bit, have a little extra caution there through
and that sun people can see.
Oh,
so
my
a little
goodness.
Smile makes a big difference.
Exactly, you can. And I've been keeping tabs on the live Google map, the traffic map there, and it has been dark red for a while now, which indicates it is slow through there. So expect some delays, and maybe if you can, maybe try and find an alternate route there on a different street or road there. If you have any updates on that situation or there's something else you want to let me know about, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line, 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks very much, Sierra Sanders, our studio director here on the program. We're about 22 or so minutes before 8 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. How far back does our history of helping animals go back? Unless you're studying to be a veterinarian, there's not a whole lot of literature on the history of animal medicine. One local veterinarian has compiled a whole bunch of documented instances of humans healing animals. Heal the Beasts, a jaunt through the curious history of the veterinary arts, has it all, even stories about elephant enemas and invisible elves. We're going to hear from the author of that book, who is also a local veterinarian. We're just getting him on Zoom here, so stay tuned for that. I think we have Philip on the line now. Yes, we do. Philip Schott is a local veterinarian and author. You've heard his voice before here on the program. Welcome. Hello.
Hi there.
What made you want to write a book called Heal the Beasts, a jaunt through the curious history of the veterinary arts?
I think, there's two reasons. One is obviously I'm passionate about animals. I've been a veterinarian for 35 years. But also from a very young age, I had a passion for history. And, those two streams are pretty far apart. It's kind of difficult to connect them. But as I've been a published author for a few years now, it occurred to me maybe I can merge these two streams, history of veterinary medicine. Second reason is there's nothing out there. This is the first book, as far as we know, written for the general reader about the history of veterinary medicine. Everything else is academic and out of print and so forth. So it seemed like there was an opportunity to tell this story that hadn't been told before.
So essentially, unless you are looking to become a vet or a vet tech, you probably... it wouldn't be accessible for you to figure out just how far back healing animals go.
Yeah, even veterinarians are kind of unfamiliar with this story as I'm finding out. So, it's exciting to share this.
So talk more about that. When you look at the history What do you think is the most surprising for you when you look at how far back healing animals go?
Well, the very first story, the book is organized into 22 chapters, each one featuring a different veterinarian or animal healer from the past. I'm going with one that I've kind of created. When we look back to 12,000 BC, they found an archaeological find of a man and a woman and a puppy buried together, and buried in a ritual way. They weren't just bones kind of accidentally piled up. And this puppy had distemper. We can tell that from the teeth. And it had lived through a couple of bouts of distemper over the course of many weeks. Even today, with our modern veterinary medicine, it's really difficult. I mean, that's a disease that has a really high mortality rate.
Right.
So
And when you say distemper, for people who don't know what that is, what is distemper?
Yeah. Distemper is a serious viral disease that has a high mortality rate in young dogs. We've got a good vaccine for it. So we don't see it very much anymore, but back 12,000 BC, obviously, they didn't have a vaccine. So it would cause neurological signs, digestive signs, respiratory signs, etc.
It's not a good
thing. Dog was cared for. Yeah.
And so you found this animal and an owner, and the animal with distemper. What was your sense of what did that illustrate to you or demonstrate to you when you saw that?
Well, kind of two things. One, that they would have had some kind of care for the animal. They would have used for herbal remedies and so forth. I mean, ultimately the dog died, but some kind of care over that time, and that they were interested in caring for this puppy. Because in those times you had grave goods. You'd have something with you in the grave that would be useful in the afterlife. A sick puppy isn't terribly useful in the afterlife. So clearly they loved this puppy, or there was some kind of emotional connection to this puppy. So that reaches back that far in history is fascinating to me.
As you go through your chapters, what is your thesis, or what is your sense of why human beings even started mending animals? Why was this something that was important to us?
I think there's two primary reasons and one sort of secondary reason. The primary reasons, I've kind of touched on a moment ago, is emotional. They're a bond of love with animals, with many animals, and you want to care for them, and you want to care for them medically when they become ill or injured. The second is a practical one. Through the expansion of agriculture and the use of animals as draft animals and so forth, they became economically valuable to individuals and to society. So you want to protect that value by caring for them. It's a big investment. If you're a peasant and your cow is your primary way of earning some sort of income, then you really want to look after it if it becomes ill. The third reason, more secondary, but is a spiritual reason. A lot of indigenous cultures and in pagan pre-Christian Europe, there was a spiritual connection to animals. They were viewed as being much more closely bound to humans. In cultures that believed in reincarnation, some animals would be viewed as your potential ancestors and/or descendants. So that connection also made it important to look after them.
Was there a story that stood out to you, or one that you might characterize as your favorite as you were going through your research?
That question, the favorite child question,
very loaded.
I mean, there's so much, but I guess the one that always jumps out at me is the story from early medieval England, or what we call the Dark Ages sometimes, after the Romans left. So peasants would be plowing the fields, and they'd find these little stone arrowheads. And they had no idea of history. They had no idea other people lived there thousands of years ago that would have used stone arrowheads. So their explanation was that it was invisible elves. And in fact, these were evil, invisible elves, and they would shoot the livestock with these arrows, and that's why livestock would get ill. So when a horse, for example, became ill, they would call in the horse leech. That's what veterinarians were called. There was a horse leech, there was a cow leech, there was a dog leech. Horse leech would come in and perform a ritual to rid the horse of this illness that was created by the invisible elves. This was written down in a book called Bald being the guy, Bald's Leech Book, reaching back to the 800s AD.
Philip, what's your pitch to people about why you think they should read this book and get it?
I think, first of all, I've tried to make it entertaining, like accessible. So history can be ponderous, and there are some weighty subjects here, like the human-animal bond, and sometimes the way we mistreated animals. but I tried to make it entertaining, tried to find the most interesting stories. There's just fascinating characters throughout. And I think then you learn something too. You learn something really interesting about how humans and animals relate. And I think it's like almost, you find out that it's almost circular. We're coming back to a previous understanding, a previous closeness to animals that perhaps we lost through the industrialization of agriculture and through urbanization. And I think that's starting to come back, and you can see that in some of the stories.
Philip, thanks for the work that you do and for making time this morning. Take care.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure.
That's Philip Schott, local veterinarian, and he wrote the book Heal the Beasts, a jaunt through the curious history of the veterinary arts. The book comes out today and is available where books are sold, of course. And let us know, because your association with animals, is it an emotional one? Is it a practical one? Or is it a spiritual one? Call our listener line, 204-788-3205, 204-788-3205. Perhaps you can't envision a moment without you living with your animals. You can, of course, email us again, informationradio@cbc.ca. I think that's is that the right email address? Well, we'll get it right for you. I usually work at the afternoon show, so we'll figure out the email. But, of course, you can call our listener line, 204-788-3205.
We carry a world of information in our pockets because we want to know. Breaking news that shapes our world. Staying on top of stories around the globe. And connected close to home. It's news you can trust. Delivered when you want and where you want. On Canada's News app. Now with CBC Radio 1. Local and live. Download the CBC News app for free.
Coming up to 13 minutes before 8 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. The late Honourable Justice Murray Sinclair was one of the greatest Indigenous leaders of recent time. He died last November at the age of 73. He will be remembered as a passionate lawyer, judge, a senator, and chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But he was also a dedicated family man. And to his granddaughter, Sarah Fontaine Sinclair, he was her Moosham. She grew up with him, sharing lessons in the form of stories about life, ceremony, and family. This week, Unreserved honors the life and legacy of Murray Sinclair. Fontaine Sinclair sat down with host Rosanna Deerchild to share a side of her grandfather that only those closest to him knew.
The relationship that I had with him was very based in stories. He would always be teaching me teachings through stories. Some of my favorite ones was he would tell me these Nana Bush stories, always on car rides or when I was at his house, and he would always be telling them in these really like animated voices, and I always remember feeling so engaged with these stories. And then suddenly I'd hear snoring, and I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, Moosham fell asleep," because of how animated these stories were that he would tell me. So then I'd have to go and get my kukum, my grandmother, to come and wake him up. But those were some of my favorite memories with him, just learning about these teachings through these really funny stories that he'd tell me.
Oh, that would be so great to hear Murray, doing all the voices and acting it out. I'm having a problem picturing it, though. Can you describe that scene for me, please?
Of acting stuff out?
Yes.
Well, it would depend on if we were on the couch, he would start off by like sitting down and he'd be like, "Okay, Sarah, I'm going to tell you a very sacred story." And then he'd go off into this, like, he'd be telling me the scenes and he'd be describing the nature around. And then when he would get to a really funny section, he'd have this like crooked smile on his face, and then he'd start doing like these voices, like really high pitched if it was like a bird or something, and then really low pitched if it was like a porcupine or like a donkey or something that he was talking about. So he had all these different voices and very big hand gestures.
Sarah Fontaine Sinclair is the granddaughter of the late Honourable Justice Murray Sinclair. She is an Anishinaabe in Cree and a music student at the University of Ottawa. She is part of this week's episode of Unreserved, honouring Justice Sinclair's memory through conversations with those who knew and loved him. The show airs today at 1 p.m. or listen wherever you get your podcasts. We're at just about 10 minutes before 8 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and 94.5 FM in Leaf Rapids. You might need a Tuesday pick-me-up. So why not join the celebration at Portage in Maine? It's called the Big High Five, and there are activities happening in each corner of the intersection. It starts at 11, goes on until 2 p.m. And you can even grab a lunch with a coworker and celebrate the reopening of the iconic intersection. Understatement, by the way. Olivia Bilson is Director of Marketing Communications Engagement for Downtown Biz and is in studio now. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
The Big High Five, why call it that?
You know what? We were chatting with our friends at the Exchange District, our friends at MMF, lots of partners in the area, and we were thinking about what can we do to really celebrate the reopening of this intersection? As you mentioned, iconic intersection. And so we thought, well, let's just ask people to come and cross Portage and Maine with us. Let's make it a celebration. Let's have some fun. Let's have those high fives, selfies encouraged. So like you said, it's going to be a really fun afternoon downtown.
Outside of high fives, I imagine there's other things too.
There's lots of things going on. Over at the Richardson Concourse, we have our Downtown Sounds live concert series over the noon hour. There's going to be some trivia. There's a local market coming up. Lots of vendors that are in that concourse down below are going to come up and bring some of their offerings up outside. There'll be lots of games. The Winnipeg Gold Eyes are going to be joining us. They're going to be at 201 Portage Avenue. Food, music, games over there. And then over across, MMF is going to be hosting some guided tours through the lunch hour, every half hour. They even have little bits of their exhibit on display inside 333 Main Street. So like I said, a lot going on from about 11 until 2 o'clock this afternoon.
Do you remember? Have you done the cross yet?
I have. It's
What was it like when you first did the cross? I have not done the cross yet.
Okay, well you better come.
Yeah, so that might be a noon thing.
You know, I did it last week. I think it was Thursday when I actually went to meet some of our partners at Portage and Maine. A few colleagues and I went, and the feeling was very much, why haven't we been able to do this before, right? And it makes it so easy to just be able to get to that place, to go see coworkers, to go see colleagues, to check out the area. And it was fun. It's easy. So certainly encourage
It's crossing the intersection.
It's crossing
right?
the intersection. And you know, some people may say this is just an intersection, but really modern cities don't have barriers for people to get around town. And really, we believe that this is a bold statement that accessibility matters and that a vibrant downtown community matters as well.
One of the things that you'll be doing is placing 4 arches at each intersection, each corner of the intersection. What's the significance? Why do that?
You know, we were thinking about how can we, add some vibrancy, add some color, just add a bit of a statement to our celebration. And, all credit due to David, our friend at the Exchange District Biz. He was thinking, like, what can we add to the intersection to really, have that bold statement?
Also kind of feels like a finish line, isn't it?
Exactly, right. And so we're working with our friends at Storefront Manitoba, and they're working with their friends at Pedal Design to design these these steel arches. They're quite large, over 7 feet, 6 feet in sort of diameter, and they really represent sort of portals, the 4 elements that shape our world. And sort of when, pointed together, they sort of create that circle, building on that connectivity, really encouraging people to walk through, to think about where they've come from and think about where they're going, and sort of what connects us in between as community members.
What have you heard so far? I mean, there have been a lot of changes in the downtown, in that part of the downtown since opening up Portage and Maine. What have you heard about from your members?
There's a great feeling of energy, excitement, vibrancy. Downtown is undergoing significant transformation right now. We have Graham Avenue, which is just, a short block over, undergoing significant transformation to turn that route into a pedestrian-friendly zone. There's street painting, there's planting, there's trees, there's places to sit. There's going to be festivals there all summer. We have Portage Place development getting underway. We have MMF with their significant developments along Main Street there. SEO transforming the former Bay site. So lots and lots of activity around downtown. And really, having this intersection opens allows people to get around downtown easier. It makes your experience downtown more positive. And for those who frequent the area, those who live in the area, those who work in the area, it just makes it easier to be able to access that intersection and support the local businesses right in the area there.
We have heard from some folks who are in the downstairs part who worry about the opening. What is downtown and Exchange Biz, District Biz doing to help folks who might be worried about the loss of foot traffic, essentially?
Yeah, you know what? We're always, staying in contact with our local businesses. We're always working to promote our local businesses. And so, today's a great example where we have some of those local businesses down in the Richardson Concourse, and they're coming up outside and bringing their market outside for folks to enjoy. And, those businesses aren't being replaced by new businesses outdoors, right? And, realistically, we do live in a climate city. So certainly, that underground will certainly be, I'm sure, very popular through those sort of colder, winter months when weather isn't so great. But absolutely, I think having that intersection open allows folks to easily get across, still pop downstairs to support those local businesses, and just really get around throughout the area.
For people who might only have half an hour or a lunchtime, what's a good time to go?
I would say come on down around 12:15. Folks are going to be gathering. Just pick a corner. We're going to have biz employees at each corner just providing instructions of our coordinated high five. Come around 12:15. We'll do the rock around 12:30, and then maybe pop over to one of the corner, get some lunch, enjoy some live music, and maybe high five a Goldeye.
It's going to be a busy day for you.
It's going to be great. And like I said, if you work downtown, live downtown, you're just passing through the area, you're a student, we really want to encourage everybody to come downtown and to really celebrate everything that we have to offer.
Thanks for coming down, and
Thank
we'll
you.
see you soon.
You bet. Thanks.
Take care. Olivia Bilson is Director of Marketing, Communications and Engagement for Downtown Biz. Let's head to your CBC Winnipeg local news desk, and Heather Wells joining us with a look at news headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, the clock is really ticking down now for people to leave Leaf Rapids. They have just 2 hours left to get out of the northern community. A mandatory evacuation is in place as wildfires burn nearby. Liz Sherrier is among 328 people getting ready to leave. She's anxious by what she describes as a scary experience. The evacuees will be heading to Winnipeg. The Firefighters Union in Thompson says public safety is being compromised due to a shortage of ambulance workers. Eric Campbell believes lives are being put at risk because the union and the city of Thompson aren't talking. In the past few days, Campbell says there have been instances where only one ambulance was available to serve the city of 13,000 people. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 8:30.
All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. You're listening to us in Thompson at 100.9 FM, 89.3 FM here in Winnipeg. Speaking of Thompson, there is an air quality advisory in effect there because of widespread smoke. So if you have any issues with your heart or lungs, you're asked to avoid outdoor activities, stay indoors if you can. High of 27 degrees is the expected temperature right now in Thompson, smoky, and 14 degrees. Here in downtown Winnipeg, as you can see, if you are following us on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream, misty and 10 degrees here in the downtown. The sun is trying to make its way out. Lots to come here in the program. In our next half hour, how much did you pay to fill up your gas tank recently? Well, depending on where you live, that answer may differ greatly. In our next half hour, we'll take a closer look at Winnipeg's gas prices and why in some places there's been a 30-cent difference between the prices. That's coming up in our next half hour. First, though, Sierra Sanders with an update on the commute. Hello.
Yes, just before we get into World Report here, just got a call from Andre. The lights are out at Kenniston and Rothwell Road. So that's kind of right by Trans-Canada Brewery Company, and as you're heading towards IKEA there on Kenniston. So the lights are out in all directions there. So treat that intersection like a four-way stop. If you have any updates on that situation or an update on the Lagimodiere and Dugald intersection that we've been talking about this morning, give me a call on the CBC commuter line, 788-3093.
All right, thanks very much. Sierra Sanders, our studio director, Marshall Hodgins on the controls, Brad Lilly's our streaming producer. I'm Faith Fondahl. More to come after World Report. Stay tuned.
On On cue. The comedian Atsuko Okatsuka has the ability to take the most difficult life experiences and make them funny. Her new stand-up special deals with adult friendships, dives into her complicated childhood. She'll be here to tell you about growing up undocumented in the U.S. and turning that experience into comedy.
You know, I'm a very observant person. I always observed.
Q with Tom Power. This morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland. And on CBC Listen, or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current.
I'm Megan Williams. 83 Canadians have been named as the newest recipients of the Order of Canada for everything from excellence in harmonica playing to trying to solve the issue of homelessness. We'll hear from some of them coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. It is a promise Prime Minister Mark Carney has made repeatedly to look to allies other than the United States to rearm Canada's military. But industry sources say Ottawa is about to award a major defense contract to a U.S. company. The CBC's Kate McKenna reports.
Canada can work towards a new international set of partnerships.
While announcing new defense spending last month, Prime Minister Mark Carney expressed two clear priorities: rearming the Canadian military and reducing Canada's reliance on the United States.
We can pursue deeper alliances with stable democracies.
But defense experts say Canada is set to award a contract for night vision binoculars worth more than $100 million to an American company because the technical requirements to bid on the contract are so narrow that only one company in the world qualifies. The request for proposals closes later today. The French manufacturer Photonis sells night vision devices to other NATO allies. In a statement, it says it tried to convince Canadian officials that its criteria don't follow industry norms.
I don't have the details, but I will look into it.
Defense Minister David McGuinty couldn't explain why, but says Canada is standing by its goal to rely less on the United States.
Going forward, we're looking, of course, to work with other partners.
Dave Perry is a defense expert with the Canadian Global Affairs Institute. He says uncoupling Canada's military procurement from the United States could take time.
We have not gotten to a space where investing 75 cents of every dollar in the U.S. market by accident.
He says until recently, Canada's policy was to work closely with the United States, and he says they have been the world's leading arms market for generations. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
Benjamin Netanyahu is expected to face more pressure today to end the war in Gaza. The Israeli Prime Minister is on a visit to Washington. He is scheduled to meet with members of Congress on Capitol Hill. Last night, he was welcomed by U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House. Tom Perry reports.
Thank you very much, everybody. It's an honor to have Bibi and Sarah with us, friends of mine for a long time, and we had a tremendous success together.
U.S. President Donald Trump heaping praise on the Israeli Prime Minister and his wife at a White House dinner. Benjamin Netanyahu returning the favor.
I want to express the appreciation and admiration not only of all Israelis, but of the Jewish people.
Netanyahu presenting Trump with a letter nominating him for a Nobel Peace Prize. Along with the mutual flattery, this dinner and Netanyahu's visit are all about reaching at least a temporary peace in Gaza. Trump is trying to press Israel and Hamas to agree to a 60-day ceasefire and begin talks on a permanent end to the war. So far, there's been no breakthrough, while in Gaza, the fighting continues. The Israeli military says 5 of its soldiers were killed yesterday by a roadside bomb. The IDF says 888 troops have been killed since October 7th. Gaza's health ministry says the war has killed more than 57,000 Palestinians. Tom Perry, CBC News, Jerusalem.
A Houthi attack has killed 3 crew members of a ship in the Red Sea. The bulk carrier is Greek-operated. It was attacked by drone and speedboats off the coast of Yemen. These are the first deaths in attacks on vessels in the Red Sea since June of last year. Houthis began attacking ships along the critical trade route in November of 2023. The rebel group says it is in solidarity with Palestinians caught in the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza. U.S. President Donald Trump is sending more weapons to Ukraine. This decision comes after pausing some critical munitions shipments to the war-torn country.
We're going to send some more weapons. We have to. They have to be able to defend themselves. They're getting hit very hard now. They're getting hit very hard. We're going to have to send more weapons. Yeah, defensive weapons primarily, but they're getting hit very, very hard. Very sad. So many people are dying in that mess.
Last week, the Trump administration halted the shipment of some weapons to Ukraine, including air defense missiles. The White House said it was part of a review of U.S. military spending. But some reports suggest there are concerns over the state of the U.S. military's weapons stockpiles. The number of confirmed deaths from the floods in Texas has now surpassed 100. The number of missing is not clear. Search efforts are nonstop, but there is little hope of finding more survivors. The CBC's Katie Nicholson has more from Kerrville, Texas.
You have to be standing next to it to really get a perspective of how tall this is. It's maybe 40 feet high.
Tom Carlson hits play on a video of an 18-wheel trailer swept up by the Guadalupe River, now deeply embedded in the muddy banks nearby of what remains of a Kerrville park.
I couldn't believe it. Again, you just don't realize the power of rushing water, and it was moving fast to do that.
Carlson's elderly parents had their own close call when the waters rose.
We got a call from them at 4:45 in the morning, and they were in their pickup moving up behind the house because the water was coming up so fast. And they're 88 years old.
There was no official flood warning at that hour, but they were lucky.
A neighbor knocked on their door, and I guess a tree had floated down on the neighbor's property and hit their front door, and everything gushed in.
Throughout the region, sometimes called Flash Flood Alley, backhoes and boats comb through the waters and mud for the missing, while those who have survived grapple with grief and the need for disaster assistance. Like Auburn Gallagher in Sandy Creek, utterly isolated by floodwaters.
I know we're not San Angelo or San Antonio, but hell, we're human beings. Help us. Give us what we need. We don't want to be the stepchildren anymore.
Help is on the way. California, Florida, and Mexico have sent professional search, rescue, and recovery teams. But the true toll of this disaster still weeks away from being fully understood. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Kerrville, Texas.
The first malaria vaccine for treating babies and very young children has been approved. Its use could start within a few weeks in Africa. The mosquito-borne disease kills about 600,000 people every year. Most of those deaths are in Africa. 3/4 of those are children under 5 years old. Health experts are calling the vaccine a breakthrough in saving young lives. The team behind a new all-Inuit law firm is on a mission to break down barriers in the justice system. Tulugak Law was set up in Iqaluit 7 months ago. As Samuel Watt tells us, it is now looking to expand its services.
I was like a really admittedly nerdy kid hanging out.
Curtis Mesha knew he wanted to be a lawyer ever since he could read. Now he heads his own law firm, Tulugak Law. It deals with the day-to-day basics, from estates, wills, to cases in the criminal court. Mesha describes his practice as Nunavut's only all-Inuit law firm.
I don't know, I think it's like the future of law in Nunavut in some way.
Mesha has brought on 2 law students to help out. Caitlin Adams, who worked with the United Nations, says she's choosing law now to help uplift Inuit and be a warm, familiar face in a foreign system.
Sometimes the justice system scares me too. And it does feel like it can be a cold place.
Hope Carpenter doesn't see many Inuits in the legal profession. That leads to a lack of empathy and understanding of the realities in the North.
You know, how can that be justice for the people here to have outsiders come in and dictate what's right and wrong?
Part of the problem, she says, is the fact there's no permanent law school in any of Canada's 4 Inuit regions. But by taking on more Inuk lawyers, Curtis Mesha hopes to make the justice system more accessible and fairer.
I definitely see a lot of it as just making sure people understand everything that's going on.
And in the coming years, he hopes to have practices in every region of Inuit Nunanut, the Inuit homeland. Samuel Watt, CBC News, Iqaluit.
I was a ghost, I was alone.
That is Golden. It's from the Netflix animated movie K-pop Demon Hunters. The film tells the story of a K-pop girl group called Huntrix that also hunts demons. They're after demons disguised as a K-pop boy band called the Saja Boys.
in check, keeping you obsessed. Play me on repeat, cause that's me in your head. Anytime it hurts.
The bands are fictional, but the songs by Korean American musicians are topping real music charts. This week, 7 Huntrix and Saja Boys songs were on the Spotify Top 50 global list. 6 of them were also on the Billboard 200 highest chart-topping soundtracks to an animated film. That hasn't happened since Disney's Encanto spent 9 weeks at number 1 in 2022. That's World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Magandang umaga, good morning, Manitoba. Faith Fundal here in Studio 15 at Portage and Spence. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Thanks for watching us on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. Marshall Hodgins on the controls today. Sierra Sanders, our studio director. How much did you pay to fill your gas tank this week? Depending on where you live, the answer to that question may differ greatly. We'll take a close look at Winnipeg's gas prices and why in some places there was a 30-cent difference between the prices. Stay tuned for that conversation coming up next here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 100.9 FM in Thompson, 97.9 FM in Brandon, and 89.3 FM, 990 AM here in Winnipeg. Let's head to your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. And Heather Wells joining us with a look at news headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a First Nations elder says he was denied boarding by a WestJet agent because of his photo identification. Lawrence Douglas Corbier was traveling from Montreal back home to Winnipeg June 30th. He says when he showed his Indian status card, his photo ID, the agent told him to step aside and wait. He ended up missing his flight. We'll hear more detail on what went down there. And less than 2 hours and counting for people in Leaf Rapids to lock up and leave town. A mandatory evacuation is in place because of wildfires burning nearby. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 8:30.
All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Heather Wells joining us from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. We're at just about 12 minutes after 8 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. We're going to see more sunny conditions today for much of the listening region. Sunny right now here in downtown Winnipeg, misty at the airport. 12 degrees is the current temperature. Foggy at the airport in Brandon, 12 degrees. Sunny and 15 in Dauphin, as you can see there if you're watching us on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Thompson this hour, smoky where you are right now, and 16 degrees is the temperature. Up in Churchill, partly cloudy and 20 degrees. We are, as I mentioned, expecting sunny conditions for Winnipeg today. A high of 26 degrees, clear tonight, and a low of 14 degrees. There is a special air quality statement in effect, so be prepared for some local smoke. A similar forecast for Brandon with possible local smoke as well. High of 25, clear tonight, and a low of 13 degrees. Dauphin, sunny today, high of 26 tonight, clear, and a low of 16. If you're in Thompson, there is an air quality statement in effect. So be prepared for widespread smoke, high of 27 degrees, tonight low of 17. But if you have any heart or lung issues, you're asked to avoid the outside because of those smoky conditions. And in Churchill today, sunny with a mix of sun and cloud. Chance of showers, a risk of a thunderstorm, high of 28. Similar forecast tonight, low of 18 degrees. And it's going to be a day, isn't it? Sierra Sanders joining us in studio now, our CBC Manitoba the Information Radio Studio Director. That's the fancy title.
There we go.
You've been following the commute as well.
I have been following the commute, yes. Just before we got into World Report there, I got a call from Andre. He was calling to let me know that the lights were out and they were flashing at Kenniston and Rothwell Road. Ooh, a little bit of a tongue twister with that one. And so that's the intersection kind of right in front of the Trans-Canada Brewery right there, and as you're heading kind of towards or away from IKEA there. So that's kind of where that intersection was, where the lights were out. I took a look at the live traffic map on Google, which, as you can tell, is kind of my best friend during these early mornings, and it was showing some dark red, so that means it is slow there. As well, we've been watching or keeping an eye on the lights at Lachemodiere and Dugald Road. The lights were completely blank there, and so that kind of happened a little earlier in the morning. We've been keeping an eye on it. As far as I know, it sounds like those lights are still out at the moment, so we're still waiting for an update on that. So if you have an update on either of these situations, you can give me a call on the CBC CBC commuter line, 204-788-3093. And I just want to say I hope the weather kind of holds up for all of the Folk Fest goers this week.
Yep.
I mean, I've been to a couple folk fests myself, and I will say it's not a folk fest without like a massive rumbling thunderstorm at one point.
It is quite a scene. You can feel it, you can hear it, and of course you can see it. So
yeah, it's not really super fun when you're laying in a tent and you're nervous that your tent's gonna fly away. I mean, I've done pretty good with like tarping down my tent to make sure I
gotta use those things that you put down. Right?
Exactly, you got to make sure you're using your tent pegs. You got to make sure you actually make sure you're staking your tent into the ground so you don't blow away.
Do you ever do put it in your backyard, your tent, and then like spray water on it just to make sure that it's still waterproof?
I mean, I've never done that before. That actually sounds like a really good idea. But then you have to make sure you dry your tent out still like afterwards, which I feel like is like the hardest part about doing that.
It will smell funny if you
Exactly, it'll smell funny.
Good.
Anyways, that's just what comes to my mind when I think of the weather this week.
We'll
fingers are crossed.
We'll make sure Riley Lechek gives us some good weather for Folk Fest. It'll be good. Amazing. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and of course everywhere on the CBC Listen app. And on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream, thanks very much for joining us today. We'll want you to call our listener line here because we're going to shortly talk about the fuel prices. Depending on where you got fuel in the last couple of days here, you may have seen a change in the prices. Call our listener line 204-788-3205 if you gassed up this week. What was the price? And did you notice a lower price as you drove around town? 204-788-3205, 204-788-3205. Because Winnipeg drivers have been noticing a pretty big price discrepancy when it comes to the cost of fuel in the city. At one pump on Waverley over the weekend, the price of fuel was just under $1 a litre. A pump in Garden City showed the price hovering at just over $1.30. What's going on here? Patrick Dehan is an analyst with Gas Buddy. It's a website that allows drivers to compare gas prices. Patrick, what the heck's going on?
Yeah, there's been a lot of volatility recently after the Middle East tensions caused oil to spike. Then about a week and a half later, oil prices plunged. And it seems like some retailers now are selling below cost, which is kind of a fascinating thing. It's real hard to stay in business when you're not making any profit on what you're selling. So that's opened up the door. Seeing a couple of stations at 104.9 this morning, but generally most other stations kind of in the ballpark of the 1-teens or even in the 120s. But this highlights that, before you fill your tank up, you always want to make sure you know what the prices are, because there's always a pocket here and there that you may see lower prices in.
And I mean, I've only been in Winnipeg for just about 5 years now. I have not remembered in recent memory of these big discrepancies. I mean, when I was in Metro Vancouver and in the rest of BC, you literally could cross the street and there would be, a fairly large price difference. But I don't remember, and my recollection might be wrong, but I don't remember seeing these large discrepancies. What's your sense of why that is? Are stations just going rogue and deciding to put their own price on the pumps there?
Well, I think a lot of this is because of renewed market volatility. Typically, if oil prices and the wholesale price of gasoline hold steady, then, almost every gas bar would be paying the same price. But there's been a lot of volatility recently because of things like trade policy in the States, OPEC increasing oil production. Oil prices this year alone have dipped as low as $58, but been as high as about $80 a barrel. So that volatility can drive fluctuations, but some stations can be more aggressive on given days of the week. They may want to meet quotas in terms of gallons sold. So there's a lot of different things that can go into it, the cost of doing business, but the cost that stations are buying that gasoline for. Winnipeg's in a pretty good spot right now. There's a decent amount of supply down in the U.S. Midwest, and Winnipeg attached to that market as a primary beneficiary of some of those very low prices and some of that supply glut that is forming in areas of the Midwest. But just as things look terrific now at some of these stations, things can change very quickly as well. Keep in mind we're in hurricane season. That certainly can impact refineries down in the States, which can, again, feed into areas of Canada. The other thing to keep an eye on as well is we saw a big move in the stock market and oil prices earlier this week as U.S. President Trump announced new tariffs on significant trading partners. So even trade policy can be a needle mover here, creating some of this volatility that opens up the door for some stations to have lower prices. Some stations may not just be competing. They may throw in the towel, and it's nauseating for a gas retailer to see these prices fluctuate all over the map. It's really very much a game of timing for these stations refilling their tanks.
Right, and it's hard to plan as well. Is there an incentive for stations to sell below cost? I mean, I know you talked about the meeting quotas there. How common is that the reason for stations?
Well, sometimes stations just want to sell more volume. The more volume they sell, the more incentive, the lower price they may be able to obtain over the course of a year. So in terms of quota, it's all on a station. If they want to sell more volume, they may be able to secure a better price. So they may have incentive to reduce their price, right, to sell more volume because they know many motorists are very price sensitive. So that's a great way to boost your volume, is to have a lower price. But yeah, there's not really any world that I can think of that selling below cost is, a good business plan. You look at wholesale clubs. I mean, some of these prices that we're seeing this morning are extremely low. They're not profitable. They'd be losing money. So, some of these are head scratchers. Now, we have seen in times past where that's happened. Stations get caught up in a price war and they really badly want to beat out their competitor. And so that may cause a couple of stations to sell below cost. I mean, we've seen that plentiful over the last decade. Stations do that. But those deals don't tend to last. So if you can fill up this morning at one of those stations at 104.9, I certainly would suggest doing so. It's great to see prices that low. In fact, here we are in the midst of summer, and gas prices across Canada are at their lowest summer level since 2021.
There is also a perception from some folks who have noticed a price divide between the north and south sides of Winnipeg, the south usually having lower prices. Do you have any sense of whether that perception is accurate?
Well, there's a lot of perceptions. Lower prices, the low-priced areas can move about an area, but there's also some truth to the fact that, across the city, areas that are more affluent where incomes are higher generally have higher prices because motorists are less price sensitive in those areas. If you're willing to go into a gas station and pay the going price, say $1.30 a liter this morning, and that station's doing a brisk business, that doesn't really give them a lot of incentive to lower prices. So motorists can kind of dictate what stations sell at by deciding to patronize a lower price station. It may give further incentive. But yeah, there's, oftentimes there may be subtle differences in the cost of doing business in one area where property taxes, labor prices are much higher, or they're even slightly higher. That can influence what a gas station is selling at.
So what do you think drivers, riders, people buying fuel should keep in mind in the coming days?
Well, you and I can't dictate what a station is going to sell at. What you can do is buy smarter. Use an app like Google Maps, or the Gas Buddy app is a great one to obviously be able to find some of these lower prices and to plan your trips around them. So, you may go to a different store in a different neighborhood, and it may bring you by one of these lower price stations. But that's what I always do, is when I get down to a half a tank, I'm always checking what the prices are because, in this instance, we're talking about a spread of in some cases, 25, 30 cents a liter. That's almost unheard of.
Patrick, thanks for making time today, and take good care.
Thanks for having me.
That's Patrick Dehan, analyst with GasBuddy.com.
If it happened today, find out today. That's the power of having the news in your hand. Get late-breaking news from reporters across the country, straight to your mobile device. Customize your experience with news from your region and what matters to you. Whether it's big headlines, detailed articles, live events, or on-demand video, CBC News has got you covered. Connect to the world. Download the free CBC News app or visit cbcnews.ca.
24 minutes after 8 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Faith Fundal. And the Winnipeg Folk Fest is days away, as you've been hearing. And a beloved Manitoba children's performer is taking the stage for the first time since 2011. Fred Penner, will be performing on the Winnipeg Folk Fest main stage on Thursday evening. And before he does that, he's going to join Up to Speed guest host Chloe Friesen on the show this afternoon. So we're going to get you in the mood to get ready. Here's Fred Penner with The Cat Came Back.
Now old Mr. Johnson had troubles of his own. He had a yellow cat who wouldn't leave his home. He tried and he tried to give the cat away. He gave it to a man going far, far away. But the cat came back the very next day. The cat came back. They thought he was a goner, but the cat came back. He just couldn't stay away. Give me a meow, go. Now the man around the corner swore he'd kill the cat on sight, so he loaded up his shotgun with nails and dynamite. He waited and he waited for the cat to come around. 97 pieces of the man is all that they found. But you know, the cat came back the very next day. The cat came back. They thought he was a goner, but the cat came back. He just couldn't stay away. Give me a meow, go. So he gave it to a man going up in a balloon. He told him for to take it to the man in the moon. The balloon came down about 90 miles away. Where the man is now, well, I dare not say. But you know, the cat came back the very next day. The cat came back. They thought he was a goner, but the cat came back. He just couldn't stay away. Give me a meow, go. So he gave it to a man going way out west. He told him for to take it to the one he loved the best. First the train hit the track, then it jumped a rail. Not a soul was left behind to tell the gruesome tale. But you know what? The cat came back the very next day. The cat came back. They thought he was a goner, but the cat came back. He just couldn't stay away. Give me a meow, go. Now the cat was the possessor of a family of his own, with 7 little kittens, till there came a cyclone. It tore the houses all apart and tossed the cat around. The air was filled with kittens, but not one was ever found. But the cat came back the very next day. The cat came back. They thought he was a goner, but the cat came back. He just couldn't stay away. Give me a meow, go. Sing it all again now. The cat came back the very next day. The cat came back. They thought he was a goner, but the cat came back. He just couldn't stay away. Give me a meow, go. Louder meow. Louder. A little quieter. Quieter meow. Quieter now. Quieter. Shh, as quiet as you can.
That's Manitoba's Fred Penner with A Cat Came Back. He's going to join Up to Speed this afternoon with Chloe Friesen to talk about the festival and what he's been up to. If you want to catch him at the fest, he plays the Winnipeg Folk Fest main stage on Thursday at 6:20 in the evening. Sarah Sanders is back in studio for an update on the commute. Hello.
Good morning. Remember when I said it wasn't super busy on the commuter line? Oh, how the times have changed.
Changes
how the
fast.
tables have turned.
Yep, so
Yeah,
fast.
so it's been a little bit busy on the commuter line. I had Yvonne give me a call and to let me know that the lights at Lagimodiere and Dugald are back working now, so things should start moving smoothly through there. She also called to let me know that Archibald, as you head towards Provencher, was a little bit backed up, so keep that in mind as well. Then I had Dawn give me a call. Main Street on to River Avenue there, as you are approaching Harkness, there is really backed up. And I took a quick look on the live map. It is quite dark red, so it is slow moving through there. So keep that in mind. As well, I had a quick note about a hydro outage in the Fort White and Shaftesbury area. So some areas or some folks out there are without power. And that could also mean that could affect the traffic lights there in those areas. So keep an eye out for any intersections without working traffic signals, and make sure you're treating those intersections as a four-way stop and being patient with your fellow commuters and understanding as well.
We like it that way.
Yes, we do. True Winnipegger fashion, I
Yep.
feel like.
And we'll have more as well. We have a bit of time left here after the news as well.
Yes, we do.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Sarah Sanders, our studio director here on the program. Marshall Hodgins is on the controls. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. Hello to the folks who are watching us on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. A reminder that on Radio Noon today, they have a call-in segment. And the question is, what's on your summer menu? Julie Van Rosendahl joins guest host Chloe Friesen to talk about all things summertime food. She'll take your questions, your recommendations, and maybe even provide some inspiration. That's coming up here on CBC Radio after the 12:30 news. First, though, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is 14 degrees in Winnipeg. The hot spot in Manitoba right now is Churchill, where it's 20. We will be seasonal today, a high of 26. Sunshine throughout the day and a little bit of local smoke as well. People in Leaf Rapids just have an hour and a half to get their bags packed up and get out of town. A mandatory evacuation order is forcing 328 people to flee as two wildfires burn nearby. One threatens power lines, the other threatens the only road in and out of the northern community. Liz Sherrier lives in Leaf Rapids and says it's scary.
We don't really know what will happen once we leave, and many people are worried about their homes and what will happen if something happens to our homes. Like, there's so much to be worried about.
Municipal leaders say buses are available to take evacuees to Winnipeg if they don't have their own vehicles. Once in the city, evacuees are asked to report to the reception centre at the Leela Soccer Complex. An emergency on top of threatening wildfires is smoldering in the city of Thompson. The Firefighters Union says public safety is being compromised because of a shortage of paramedics. Eric Campbell believes lives are being put at risk because the union and the city are not talking. In the last few days, Campbell says there have been instances where only one ambulance was available to serve the city of 13,000 people.
The fact that we're the ones dealing with the call volume and we kind of know what's needed, we've always said that 3 full-time ambulances running daytime and nighttime is what is needed for a city with as high of a demand of emergency services as Thompson has.
Campbell says low pay and heavy workload have left a vacancy rate of more than 50% in the ambulance service. He wants to discuss that with Thompson's mayor and council. The province acknowledges Thompson needs a new model for ambulance services. A First Nations elder says a WestJet agent denied him boarding because of his photo ID. Lawrence Douglas Corbier was traveling from Montreal home to Winnipeg on June 30th. He says when he showed his Indian status card as identification, the boarding agent told him the card had expired, but the card was issued in 2024 and is valid until February of 2029. The Canadian government-issued identification is used by First Nations people who are registered under the Indian Act. Corbier's friend, David Harper, says when he called WestJet customer service, they didn't even know what an Indian status card was.
They start asking, is he from India? That's totally ignorant of them, how WestJet doesn't teach their staff in that sense, where culturally sensitivity should be at the forefront of this company.
Harper says eventually WestJet rebooked Corbier on a different flight the next day and put him up in a hotel. Corbier says he is still shaken by the experience. In an email to CBC, WestJet apologizes for the inconvenience and says it is contacting Corbier. An advocate for infill housing and urban forests is the first candidate to register in Winnipeg's Elmwood East Kildonan by-election. Emma Durand Wood is a writer who was trained as a library technician. She says this city needs to allow more varieties for housing.
there's a single family house, let's make it easy to add a secondary suite so that you can have some extra income to help with the mortgage, maybe have an older family member move in with you.
Elmwood East Kildonan has been vacant since the death of Councillor Jason Schreier in April. The by-election to replace Schreier on City Council takes place October 25th. Canada has come to terms with Japan on a new security agreement. Here is Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand.
It is a critical step forward on all counts. It gives Canada and Japan the tools that we need to strengthen our security partnership, which is so very important in times of global challenge.
Minister speaking today in Tokyo. The agreement will see the two countries share classified information relating to national security issues. From Tokyo, Anand flies to Malaysia for meetings with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. And a new report warns the endangered killer whale population off the BC coast is facing a high probability of extinction. The report from a group of more than 30 scientists outlines a number of urgent recommendations, including establishing enforceable underwater noise standards. The scientists say the whale population is showing no sign of recovery despite a series of measures adopted 6 years ago by both Canada and the U.S. You can find the latest news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. I'm Faith Fundahl in for Marcy Marcusa. Thanks very much for joining us today. If you're trying to figure out what to wear, if you're in Winnipeg, we're expecting sunny conditions and a high of 26 degrees. Similar forecast essentially for Brandon and Dauphin as well. Sunny and a high of 25 and 26 for today. A reminder that there is an air quality statement in place for Winnipeg. So if you have heart or lung issues, be aware that the air might be impactful to you. If you're in Thompson, widespread smoke in the forecast today because of those wildfires, high of 27 degrees. And in fact, there is an air quality advisory, a warning in effect there as well. For Churchill, we're expecting sunny conditions, then sun and cloud mixture with a risk of a thunderstorm, a high of 28. Yeah. That's what we're expecting. Sierra Sanders has a last look at your commute. Hello.
Good morning. I got busy here in the last half of the show, but just a reminder to folks that the lights at Kenniston and Lowson Crescent there, those lights are out and they are flashing red. So things are moving a little bit slower through there. So make sure you're treating that intersection as a four-way stop. And then just a reminder that there's been a power outage there in the Fort White Shaftesbury area. So some might be without power there. That also means that some light signals might be affected there. So keep an eye out for any intersections without working traffic signals. Make sure you're treating those as a four-way stop and being kind to your fellow commuters.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's Sierra Sanders, our studio director here on the program. Marshall Hodgins on the controls. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. I'm Faith Fundahl. Take good care. Mag-ingat po kayo. World, nope. The Current is standing by. Stay tuned.